I am live now. Greetings to everybody on Twitch, and soon we'll have the YouTube open as well.
Yes, hello, Twitch chat.
All right, everybody. So today it's very exciting, and we're not really going to start for a little bit longer, but you can start getting excited about it. We have two special guests here today. Anushka, aka Bloodqueen, is already here, so greetings, welcome.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
And we will also have Rachel, aka Rachangel, joining us. And with their help, we're going to be rebooting an old favorite of mine, Endgame Sensei. And due to the absence of Kostya and Jesse at the moment, I am going to temporarily promote myself from Endgame student to Endgame Sensei here, and I will... Yes, I did. And so we'll be giving them an endgame to play for anyone who hasn't seen the old show. They'll have an endgame to play, and while they play it, I will talk to all of you about what I think is going on. And then when they're done playing, we'll all discuss together, and depending how long it takes, we may get a couple games in. Give them each a chance to play white, ideally. So that's the
Yes.
plan.
And I am an Endgame Sensei fan.
Okay.
So that's how I got started with a lot of the minor piece endgames.
Okay. So you've seen some old episodes. You know what we're talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember I don't know, there was one specifically that I saw and like the vibes were like I don't know. It made me feel like it would be really fun to do it with Rachel.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I sent it to her and to you. And yeah, I'm excited to see if it'll go well because I feel like Rachel and I have really different chess styles and
Mm-hmm.
uh like really different strengths and weaknesses,
Mm-hmm.
which is what makes it so fun to learn from each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
and
When
like
selecting a
different
training
backgrounds.
partner, when
Yeah.
selecting a training partner is a very interesting question. Like, what makes a good training partner? Well, first of all, somebody who you like spending time with. That's pretty, that's pretty important.
Hmm.
And then sometimes people think, oh, I want somebody really close to me in strength, which can be the case. But for me, the second thing that you look at after whether or not you actually want to spend time with each other is whether you have a similar kind of passion or degree of interest in what you're doing, right? So if you both want to train about the same amount of time, you won't have somebody always saying, hey, you want to train now? And the other person's like, no, I got to play more Candy Crush first or something like that. And then, third would be you want somebody in your ballpark in rating. But actually, as you point out, having people with a very different approach can be quite good. And often you'll have people with the exact same rating and completely different strengths and weaknesses and ways of thinking about the game, where if you got inside her head, you might say, what is going on in here? How does she come up with moves? What a mess, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Or it might be much more orderly than what happens inside your head. Who knows?
Yeah. Rachel's a really concrete player. Like, that's what I noticed about her.
Mm-hmm.
And I am more abstract and I will like try to put positions into words and like describe it like that and then like based on the words decide who's winning, who's better, like who should be winning, um, who deserves to win. And she just kind of like thinks like in terms of moves and
Mm-hmm.
not very much else. Yeah.
Right. Move, move, move. Yeah. I'm originally a move, move, move kind of player.
Mm.
And I fancied myself as sort of coming up with concepts and telling stories and stuff, but apparently all the stories were wrong, and the only thing that kept me going was my move, move, move. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think it's changed a little bit now in that I'm worse at calculating move, move, move. I don't know if I've gotten any better at anything else, but I guess
Hmm.
Well, I think the one thing I've gotten better at is the end game. Although I might still play the end game in kind of a move style, but I just went from uninterested in it to super interested in it. And once you're interested, then you're asking some questions and looking at some moves. So it's a start.
Yeah. It's funny that you say you don't do that so much anymore because at the Gambito, it was me, Hayden, my boyfriend, and who was bouncing across in chat, and host Mahogi, who's like our other friend.
Okay.
And we were talking about you actually, and he was talking about how like originally, like when he first, I don't know, like when he first like came across you on the internet or something, he didn't know much about you, and then as he like started to understand your style, he was like, "Wow, this guy like plays like a madman and like calculates like really well." And that's just like the only thing he knew about you. So
Yeah.
it's funny that you say you don't calculate so much
I don't
anymore.
calculate as well now, but maybe he saw some of
Yeah,
my older games,
yeah, maybe.
or maybe I
I don't
still calculate a tiny bit better than him, and that makes it seem still like impressive, right? Because I
know.
guess like even if you thought of like a chess player like famous for whatever positional grinds like Petrosian or Karpov or somebody, but if you
Mm-hmm.
did an analysis session with them and calculated with them, you'd be like, oh my god, they calculate like just insane.
Yeah, that's true.
So sometimes it's just a matter of like levels, like an IM might still calculate a little bit better than a national master, even if
Yeah.
I'm not as good as when I was 18. But yeah, I had an experience where I got to play Gata Kamsky. Do you know who that is?
Oh yeah, is he in St. Louis now?
I don't
I
know where
think.
he lives now, but
Oh, okay.
when I was first learning about the chess world and reading my first chess magazines, he was preparing to play a match against Karpov for the FIDE version of the World Championship after Kasparov had split off. And so I watched him play this match with Karpov, which was very interesting. One of the early shapings of my chess. And Kamsky is famous for being this amazing positional player. And so one day I got the chance to play him when he started his comeback. And I played him in this tournament, the Millionaire Open or something like that. And in the opening, I was really afraid that he was going to out strategy me and that, his pieces would suddenly appear on good squares. And I didn't see how he got control of the squares, or I didn't see the maneuver
Mm-hmm.
coming, or there's some underlying thing I didn't get. And like, strangely with black, within like 12 moves, I was better, but I didn't believe it because I was so assuming I was going to lose, right? So, but then
Hmm.
slowly, I'm like, wait, I am better. Wait, I am better. And the more I looked, and as we played a few more moves, I'm like, wow, I'm just like completely outplaying him. I've got this concept of how to play this variation of the French that I've, come up with over a few years on my own, and it's like working. And so the position was like great, and then probably at like my apex, it was like +1, like I'm up basically a pawn for nothing, good advantage. And then it just got complicated, and he outcalculated me like insanely, which was the only thing before the game I thought I had a chance. I was like, he knows every position, he knows every strategy, he'll see every threat coming, but if somehow it's a total mess, like I sometimes outcalculate people,
Hmm.
and then his calculation was insane. And after the game, I talked to him about the game, and it was just like the speed and the stuff that he just rattled off that he looked at, and I was like, okay, I'll remember this. Really good players who are famous for being boring positional players or steady technical players who just trade to end games, they still calculate a million times better than like a 2400 who's more famous for being a good calculator. Like,
Yeah, it's a good thing to keep in mind.
just no comparison.
Yeah.
So, should I show you an endgame?
Yes, please.
All right. So, I've got a position up on my stream, but I can send you the fen as well. What would be the best or easiest way
Uh,
to
Fen is fine.
show
Yeah,
you this?
I'll
Okay.
I'll plug it into analysis board or
All
something.
right. I'll ship you a fen. And
Okay.
then
I'll make a classroom. That's what I'll do.
copy the fen. And so what I'm going to ask you with this fen is to tell me basically what you think the evaluation is, and
Hmm.
then maybe anything relevant about how you come up with your evaluation, right? Like what's your, I guess, story that you're using, since you're probably not calculating moves. So you can tell me your story about this position.
Okay.
And then if Rachel gives us time, I'll give you a crack at it against me from whichever side you think is better.
Okay. Um, all right, I have the position up. I can also send you the link to the classroom in case we end up doing classroom things.
Okay,
I
cool.
don't know. And this is from white side or black side, or should I just say things about everyone?
Um, yeah, I mean, basically, my opening question to you is like, what's the evaluation? And then,
Okay. Um, what is the evaluation?
yeah.
Well,
And everyone in
white.
chat, you should play along at this game because this is a big piece of these end games as well. Is you start off by sort of having a sense of who's better and why.
Mm,
So, yeah.
okay. Um, so it's equal pawns. White has the bishop pair advantage. So, must be kept in mind. And it's like pretty open position. So you feel the bishops, they're looking at things.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and white has this potentially weak passer. I mean, it's not really like what pieces are really going to attack it. Um, I would say it's more of a strength than a weakness in this
Mm-hmm.
position so far, but
Mm-hmm.
there are still rooks on the board. So, um, yeah, I guess in my brain I'm still trying to figure out if it's a good thing or a bad thing that
Yeah.
that we have the passer.
Yeah, fair enough.
Um,
It's a dual identity, right? Because in the middle game they would have called it an isolated queen pawn, right? An IQP,
mhm,
which is a whole branch of chess positions that have had entire
mhm,
books written just about that one structure.
mhm.
In an endgame, it's also a passed pawn, which sounds a lot more promising.
Yeah.
And isolated pawns are supposed to be bad in endgames. Like the person who
Mhm.
has the isolated pawn would usually be avoiding the endgame. But the person with the pass pawn might be headed for the endgame. So yeah, that's an important feature in the position for you to sort of figure out to what extent it's a strength or weakness.
Yeah. Now that I'm looking at it, I'm seeing like more concrete moves. Uh, so like Rook e5 is an idea, but they can always defend. With Knight f6, and so it's not like we're immediately threatening to win anything, but like it's nice that our rook is already on an open file and their pieces are kind of like weirdly coordinated. Like the knight is like almost dominated, almost,
Mm-hmm.
by the bishop, and then by the bishop on h2,
Yeah.
and then their bishop looks pretty nice. But if we do something like bishop c7, and then either they like resign their rook to the fate of staying on a8 to like defend their pawn,
Mm-hmm.
or they can push a4, I guess, but then we can go bishop c2, then bishop b3, and maybe we can even take, and there's not really like a way for them to defend that pawn.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like our it, because we have the bishop pair, it's easier for us to attack their pawns. And there's pawns on both sides of the board, so that's a bishop pair positive.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, I think white is better, but not winning.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, that's my take.
Better but not winning. So it would take another one mistake from black or a couple mistakes. Do you feel like black's close to the edge or chilling?
Yeah, I think black has to play accurately for like a few moves in a row in order to be okay,
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Cool.
I don't know. I'm just like saying words.
All right. Anybody in chat want to chime in? Now's your chance. Or actually, honestly, your chance would have been before Anushka explained it so well.
Okay. Hayden says white seems substantially better.
Mm-hmm.
Black on the cusp of defeat.
Okay. Yeah. I often think of the of advantages in chess as kind of like near a ledge, and I think that matters less at like a 1200 level where people sometimes will like lose a piece, but then even if they're down a piece, they might win back a piece.
Mhm.
But in master level, often you have to get like a small advantage, and then there's the question like, can you ever push the opponent off the edge, right? Like, is your advantage big enough? And so I see like the line of demarcation between an advantage and winning is
Mhm.
like the edge of a cliff. And when you're defending an endgame, I think that's when you feel it the most. That you're like, sort of standing right by the edge, trying to hang on. Let's see if we can kick off a game. I'll give you white since you think white is substantially better.
Oh God. Okay.
Yeah. So we
Substantial
can,
was bouncing across his choice of words.
yeah. Um, your name on chess.com is also Blood Queen, or is there any other details to it?
Nothing.
No,
Yeah,
Blood Queen. It is.
just Blood Queen. No
Okay, we'll go
interesting letters
Blood
or anything.
Queen, and then we want to be able to put in our own position, custom position, setup position. Oops.
You don't see how Rook E5 isn't crushing? I mean, Knight F6. They move the pieces back. The knight wants to go back to F6 anyway. He's miserable. Okay, Rachel is almost home.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm stalking her, so
Cool.
we'll get a Rachel soon.
Aye, aye, aye. To re-grab the fan. Okay, so maybe we shouldn't start a game in that case.
We can probably
we can
start
just
a
see how
quick
far
game.
you get, right? Doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
So, new game.
Give her time to like settle in after she comes home.
Okay, Blood Queen, custom position odds with a fen. 3 minutes. Let's give you a 2-second increment as well. With
Thank
that,
you.
I play as black. Unrated.
Dojo,
Okay.
the Endgame Sensei, they do like weird time control, right? It's like
Yeah.
5 plus 30 to
Yeah.
mimic the, yeah.
All right, I sent you a challenge. It says Blood Queen is not accepting challenges. Oops.
Wait. I should be, but sometimes it doesn't change in my settings. Worst case, I can also send you a challenge. Here, I'll give myself white 3 plus 2. Is that
Yeah,
that what we want?
with this fen here.
Okay. And are you D Bruce?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Custom challenge. And here, 3 plus 2 versus there. Okay. And I play as white. And is it working?
Yep.
Okay. Cool.
All right. Good luck. And yeah, we normally play 5 plus 30. Because that's like a typical time control to have at the end of a classical game when you end up in an end game.
Yeah. Okay. I guess I'll go with this. This is what I was thinking about earlier. God, I love Los Angeles.
Good start. You love Los Angeles?
Yeah, that was sarcastic.
Okay.
There's like a really loud motorbike outside. I guess maybe my mic didn't pick it up, which is great.
Yeah. Okay. Aye, aye, aye.
Can't believe Chesscom does the auto abort thing past move 1.
Yeah. Super annoying.
Whoa.
Hello.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi.
Hey.
I
Hi.
see. Hello.
I did not I completely forgot that we had this today. I'm really sorry.
It's okay.
It's all right. You've got some time to collect yourself because we're playing each other.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm
Amazing.
gonna soften up Anushka for you so you have an easier time today.
Okay.
or inflate her ego.
I don't think we need
Don't
that.
tell me she's gonna beat you.
Yeah, we'll see. The relegated rook. Oh,
Yeah.
no.
I know David Bruce hates to see that move.
This other person has a plan.
I have no plan.
You just played a move.
Don't tell him that.
Looks like a plan.
Rachel,
Yes.
we went to this Asian like supermarket and I got this $4 box of 100 jasmine green teas and I made chaji at home.
Oh my god.
And it was really good actually.
What do you mean you made chaji? What does that mean? Like you
Like I
made just
used Yeah, like I like really recreated it. Like I used like some salt and like oat milk and like a little bit of brown sugar creamer and it tasted just like chaji and it was good. I thought you
I
might
don't believe that it just as
Okay, well,
someone
you don't
who's like an active like like you don't understand how loyal I am to chaji.
Okay. You try it
But
and you let me know if it's the same, but I'll make it for
okay.
you someday.
Yes, please, please. I would love that.
I say this before I destroy you.
Oh.
Hmm.
Whoa.
Whoa.
Watch us play in Chicago Open. That would be insane. I don't know.
No. Don't speak that into
We
existence.
fly all the way there just to.
That's happened to
no.
me. I traveled the world going to tournaments with Josh Friedel, and then we got paired with each other a couple times eventually.
It's so sad. I hope it doesn't happen.
The odds of the
this
Chicago
is
Open are low.
not
That's a
good.
big tournament.
Don't say that. Ready. Oh. Okay.
Mari, thank you so much for the raid. Thank you. If there's a mod, can you say something to Mari? Wait.
Where are you guys sparring, by the way? Or where are you guys playing?
Chess.com.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Was that the question?
Yeah. No, I don't know if you were like playing actual game on chess.com or like classroom
wait,
type
this
of-
is a conundrum, actually. Okay, I guess I have to do this. But then I'm losing my bishop pair, which is like the one thing. Also, light squared bishop, and all his weaknesses are on light squares. I'm not enjoying this conundrum.
Did you start with odds or something, or is he just trying to see your style?
She's starting with a position that she thought was good for white.
Clearly not a position that you thought was good for white.
Oh, wait. I didn't... Okay, that was a bad...
Oh, really? That's good to hear.
It's just... I didn't realize that both of the pieces could do the thing, you know?
Right.
You know how it
both
be.
do the thing.
It's okay.
I'll use the bathroom. I'll be right back.
Okay, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Oh. Okay. Okay. We're just gonna do this. You know? I mean, it'd be like that. This isn't worse than blundering my queen to bouncing across, I don't think. In terms of, okay, well, I can design this. GG's.
Yeah. All right. Well, the position is good for white, but I guess my chat claims Rachel distracted you. So.
Oh, that's nice of your chat. I would have lost this anyway against a international master. Just a wild guess. Probably would have lost it. Yeah, this was an interesting like coordination on the light squares. I guess I should have just like bitten the bullet and gone bishop e4 probably. I just like on
Versus
principle didn't want to
trading
give
the
up
pieces,
anything.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes
Like if there was a
that's what I
way to
expected too.
trade light squared bishops.
But I
Should have
was
been that.
calculating, well, not very intently, because I'm also just changing video sizes in OBS and stuff. But I was sort of calculating that bishop e4, f5, bishop e4, f5, right, chasing the piece, bishop b7, rook b8, and then I'm threatening knight d3 and rook b7, and I wasn't exactly sure what you would do.
Right. I'm making a classroom.
Yeah.
And then maybe we can all talk about it together. And I'll just put the link in here. I don't give you guys perms.
There's a way in which sometimes in the endgame, having a worse position can make certain endgames easier to play. Because like if you see something messy, you can just be like, sure, my opponent doesn't want it to be messy. That feels sort of like counterplay. They might be scared, maybe I have a chance. And you just kind of let it rip, So I didn't have to finish calculating this. I knew this was better than just sitting around and losing. So so I went for it. All right. How are you feeling, Rachel? I mean, one of my greatest hells would be being stuck in traffic. Are you needing
I'm
some time
good. I'm okay. I have lived in LA my whole life, so that is not a greatest hell for me. That is just the world that we live in.
That's just
my
the baseline,
yeah.
Okay. So you feel ready to start the actual episode against Anushka, knowing that it will be a battle?
As ready as I could be today, yes.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
See, I don't have to play well. I just have to play better than Rachel.
That's right.
Whoa! Whoa!
No,
I don't play well. You don't have to play well, but just okay.
That's the same for you.
Okay. But I don't think that way. I'm just like, fuck, I need to play like my best,
Oh, I need to play my best too. Yeah.
Anushka's taking to heart what I told her earlier today about how most people don't even take into account their opponents. And she's like, okay, true. I understand. It's like the guy trying to outrun the bear and the other guy says, you can't outrun the bear. I just have to run faster than you.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's what we're going to do, Rachel. Let's see. Well, maybe I'll just officially kick off the part that I will perhaps later clip and post to YouTube, okay? So we'll say, welcome everybody to the reboot of Endgame Sensei. I am very happy to be joined here by two promising students of the Endgame, Bloodqueen and Rachangel. Thank you for being here, and I hope it will be fun and perhaps valuable for you. The format will be as follows. I'm going to show you an endgame position. And you are going to have some time to think about it, and you're going to give me your evaluation of the position. Then we will mute our mics in Discord, so you can each still talk to your chat, and I can talk to my chat without distracting each other. And you'll play the position, and I will provide some commentary on my side. You can provide some commentary to your chat, but I would urge you to try to play well more than you try to provide scintillating commentary while playing. They'll probably be entertained just by your concentrated face. It'll be a good example for them. So I'm going to show you the position. We'll discuss it very briefly. We'll get your evaluations and a couple thoughts. Then we'll play the position out, and then we'll come back together to talk about it. And hopefully we'll play 2 games, so you each get to play white. And you just have to let me know if it gets late for you and you don't have time to play a second time, but we'll give it a try. So, without further ado, let's reveal today's position over here.
Drum roll, please. Oh, so intense.
Yeah. I'm gonna
Oh my
grab
gosh.
I'm gonna grab you all the fen and send it to you here. So
Yeah,
everybody
what a reveal.
here is our position for today. It is white to move, as the most observant of us will figure out, even without being told that. So it's going to be white's move. And so our first question to both of you is who
Are you guys in? Sorry, are you guys in the classroom?
I just put it on an analysis board.
Okay. I'm just
Yeah.
gonna put on an analysis board then too. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so the first question is who is better and why, and everybody can have a minute to think, and then we'll start discussing it. All right. Rachel, you can keep thinking a little bit. We're going to have Anushka go first because I know she has a sense or an idea about this.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. I will do my best. Yeah, I kind of like intuitively decided like 2 seconds in, and then I tried to, gather some more, think about some moves and maybe see if my idea changed, and it didn't. So I think black is much better.
Okay.
Yeah, pawn structure like looks worse, but like uh we have this beautiful outposted knight. No one's ever kicking it out. Like how is this rook ever getting in? White's rook. Also white has the bishop, which is like pawns on both sides of the board, usually a slight edge. But in this case, the outposted knight is controlling like it's octopus knight. It's like so many light squares in the center, like taking those away from the light squared bishop, which is really beautiful. And yeah, the bishop's attacked. You have to move it. So black has tempo, and all of their pawns are more advanced. Their king is more advanced. White's pawn on F or C2 looks like a weakness, and yeah, rook is more active. I want like vine boom sound effects after every like weakness that I say. Yeah, that's my evaluation. Black is much better.
Cool. Yeah, you looked relaxed for most of that time, like you weren't working that hard, and Rachel was like what? I could see her working.
So follow that. Like you're like, Rachel, you have anything to add? Like what am I supposed to add to that?
Did I say everything?
Well, for one thing, do you agree?
Yes, I agree. I would pick black here.
You would pick black? Okay.
Yeah.
And for similar reasons.
Yeah. Pawns are more advanced. I mean, octopus knight. I've never heard. I mean, I'm sure now that you say octopus knight, I've heard that term, but I've never thought of it that way before.
Yeah.
But the knight is just insane. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that it's just harder to know where the pieces are going, as there's so much more space and mobility for black. I think for white it's hard to know what to do, especially with the rook, with the king. I think it's I mean I don't think it's like it crushing, like black is crushing or anything, but I think black has a slight edge.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's kick off our first game then. Everybody, you've heard our two contestants' opinions of the evaluation. both preferring black. Neither of them said white was lost, but they seem to think that pretty much every positional advantage on the board was in black's hands here. Rachel, you're going to have black in the first game.
Oh boy, okay.
So can one of you send a challenge to the other? I think,
can,
Anushka, you've just done a challenge like this a moment ago, so maybe you can.
Yeah.
So you get the white pieces. It'll be your move first. We'll do 5 minutes plus 30 seconds. And be aware that the first 1 or 2 moves, chess.com will forfeit you if you spend too long on the move.
Right.
So one of the reasons I chose a position where the bishop was attacked is to make white's first move relatively easier as you get into a game.
Okay. 5 plus 30. Okay. Oh, it's funny. It lists this as a rapid time control, and I'm white first, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Are you in live, Rachel?
What's that?
Live
Are
chess.
you in live?
Live chat? What do you mean?
Chess.
Like play?
Like, oh, yeah.
Okay.
Do I see?
I'm sending it now.
Also, I don't know if you want to do like a shared stream together chat at some point.
Yeah, we can do that. I don't know,
Okay.
whenever.
Do you want to, or
I sent
I
the
can
challenge
just-
already, but it'll probably stay there for a while. Yeah, I can
Okay.
accept now if you want.
I just sent you a thing, and then we could just do that.
Okay.
And then
I don't know
yeah.
if David, if you want to do that with Chess Dojo too, or if you want to keep the I don't know.
And we can all, yeah, that way we can all have the same chat at once.
Okay.
I don't know.
I'll send Chess Dojo an invite too, and then yeah, we could just turn off our mic and camera and just have one chat all together, one big chat.
Okay.
Did you send? Oh, okay, I got it.
Yeah, I sent it. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just gonna mute myself here.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Yay!
Hello, Rachel.
And
chat.
I sent a chat to Chess Dojo or a stream together request to Chess Dojo as well.
Okay.
It should just come up when you go on Twitch. It should come up just in your notifications.
Yeah, I saw it. It didn't work with my browser.
Oh,
okay.
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 That might
Yeah.
be yeah.
I'll be
I
the
think we
odd guy
tried to
out
use
for
it
today.
together, too.
Yeah, it's okay. Okay.
You see the challenge?
Yes. But for some reason your Discord vanished. So give me
What?
1 second to just, or like the. Oh wait, never mind. You're back. Okay. I will accept it now. Okay. Oh gosh. Okay.
Okay, and then we mute in Discord. Yes.
Oh yes. Okay. Yes.
Has the game started?
Yes, the game has started.
Yeah.
That's our bad. Do you want? Are you following?
No, it's okay.
one of us?
I clicked to follow. Let's see if I can see it.
Oh, okay. David respectfully declining the opportunity to be exposed to SD gens.
I'll find it in a second. Is your game somehow privated or something? I don't see why I can't find it.
I don't think so.
It's weird. Let's go watch.
Yeah.
Okay, I got it.
Okay.
Yahoo. All right. All right, folks. So the first move was this bishop saved itself from the rook and knight's attack. That was supposed to be a relatively easy first move for white to play, and it's the correct move. The bishop wants to keep the c2 pawn defended, right? So it's kind of a choice between bishop d3 and bishop e4. And bishop e4 I think would be generally pretty bad because you're in line for black to play f5, f4, gaining more space with tempo on your bishop. So I'm moderately sure that this bishop d3 is the best first move. And then we get a5 from black because this pawn is hanging, so that's a good choice for black as well. And then white brings the king towards the center, and black responds by trying to grab space over on the king side. Let's see if white cares about this f4 move or not. They just bring the king further. Okay, so my sense is that this f4 move is potentially valuable. So I would be tempted as white to play the move f4 right here. It gives the bishop something to attack. It keeps the rook from being able to transfer through the 5th rank by keeping that pawn stuck there. And if black's able to play f4, then the move c3 will never undermine the knight because there will be yet another defense of the knight. King f6 played. Okay, so Rachel also not in a rush to play f4 herself here. Just advancing her king towards the center. And now rook to g1. This move is prophylaxis, aka a preventative move against f4. Because now f4, pawn takes, rook g6 looks bad for black probably, right? We drop a pawn and the white rook becomes really good. So rook g1. And that's one of those mysterious rook moves. It looks like the rook's on the open file. Then we put the rook behind this pawn. But if black plays f4, the rook comes alive. If white plays f4 and black trades, the rook might also come alive. So I think, eliminated the mystery of the mysterious rook move, but it's still a really cool move. And so we can see that both players played their first moves reasonably quickly. I mean, not blitzing, but they were just spending, 25 to 30 seconds on improving the king position. So this stuff was, the first couple moves were pretty clear to them. And now I think Rachel is wondering about like a plan, like how to improve her position, where she wants to expand. She's already grabbed a lot of space, right? So these are all pretty far advanced. If she wants to advance further, I mean, f4 doesn't work right now, but she could work towards it. A4 and a3 or a4 and b3 could be played, but it doesn't feel like white's weak over there. So black might need a weakness in white's camp if they want to try and claim that they have the advantage, right? There was a crushing move with knight takes c2 earlier. I think white's kept the pawn defended. Oh, was it maybe when the king was on c1? Let's go check that. Because they were playing quickly at the beginning. It is possible they could have missed something. Knight c2 attacking the rook. I assume this is what Jacques Granola was probably talking about. And then if bishop c2, d3 even stops rook e2. If the rook had come to the second rank, it would just be a fancy trade. But this looks completely winning. Completely winning. So they weren't yet maybe warmed up to looking at specific moves. They were still sort of advancing a general idea or strategy, right? Which was, I want to centralize my king and grab space, And I find that a lot of people either think tactically or strategically, but not both at once. Okay, h5 was the move after deep thought here. Grabbing more space, maybe this, we'll see. And white plays h4, looking to develop the rook. And yeah, black's having to think a little bit harder. So knight takes c2. Yeah, I mean, if you were given that in a book of tactics, then like right here, if you gave someone this position in a tactics book, they would find knight c2 in a couple seconds. These players. But because they're thinking about these deep positional values, right? Like, oh, the outposted knight versus the bishop. Oh, do we advance pawns on the king side or the queen side? All this strategic thinking. They missed one tactical opportunity, both of them, for black. So white's king could not cross to c1 as it did here, right? Before doing that, you would have to play a move with the rook, which could be either rook e2 or rook g1. Even rook g1 would allow you to cross over later if you wanted to, I think, right? Because knight takes, bishop takes, d3, rook here. And it's just a fancy trade. And rook e2 would also stop that, right? So, yeah, a little extra inconvenience. White gets away with bringing the king into the middle faster than it should have been able to get there. We also had a question about a plan with rook a1 and a3 for white as a way to develop the rook along the a file, force a pawn trade. Potentially possible. Let's look at that for a second in place of rook to g1. As we see Rachel getting into a little bit of time trouble, but now we see why. She's plays a very complicated move, and the game is exploding. I think we're going to stick on this move instead of looking at rook a1 for now. So f4, idea is takes, maybe she'll take this way to just get these pass pawns started, or maybe, well, it's hard to say for sure. She could take either way in response to that. She could even play the move g4, the weird pawn breakthrough as a pawn sack. This is where Bloodqueen needs to stop and use some of her time. She can't just keep, oh, and she played quickly. She can't just keep putting the pressure on Rachel and just hope that Rachel's going to self-destruct. Rachel's doing complicated stuff, and she needs to think as hard as Rachel on this. Rachel spent 2.5 minutes on f4, and she spent 30 seconds here recapturing. She really needed to spend about 2 minutes herself at this point. That, I mean, she's built a time lead on the previous moves, and here is like one of the most relevant points in a game to use the time advantage. And you know, endgame skills is not just about, oh, is that a good pawn or is that a good square for a piece or whatever. It's also how to use your time. It's the same as in the rest of chess, right? How to use your time. When do you use your time? Do you have a sense for when there might be a tactic? You know, are you alert? Are you resilient when you realize you've missed something or something's gone against you? So there's another option here of takes, king takes, takes, king takes. And this looks more or less like a dream for Rachel. So I think Bloodqueen's probably right to avoid this, but it needs to be reflected on longer than she did. The idea here is that the black king has improved, is in striking distance of this pawn, and that this h-pawn could become a strong passer here. Seems pretty plausible. White's bishop and king are not well placed to deal with that pawn. So normally it would be a knight who would suffer from the opponent having an outside passer, and the bishop wouldn't care so much. But here, with this pawn blocking the long diagonal, not easy for white to deal with this pawn. And, yeah, it looks a little bit scary for white. Perhaps still defensible. You know, just getting behind the pawn. Maybe it wouldn't be the end of the world. But black is winning a pawn in that variation. So she went for g takes f4. And, yeah, and Rachel's choice was going here, making this outside passer right away. White could go rook h1, and Anushka is finally stopping here and really thinking about it. You could go rook h1 and go after this pawn, or you could go rook g6 and get your rook active. Problem is the h5 pawn is defended, so if you get active, then what are you doing about this pawn? Yeah. Yeah, so the most likely move would be rook h1. We've got a move, rook h1. So credit to Anushka for thinking here. But I will say, folks, in general, I would have spent those 2 minutes right here, and I would have had my next move planned. You know what I mean? when you make this decision, you should. This is the critical decision. Once you get here, hopefully you have a plan. Yeah. Okay. So she comes here. Knight G2 is revealed, defending the pawn and planning to come to F4. White can kick the knight with the bishop, which will eliminate this pawn, but it won't prevent black from setting up the basic situation that they want, more or less, right? Which is outside passer, knight on a nice dark square. This position looks really pleasant. Looks like Rachel looked really deeply before she played that F4 breakthrough. And she's also explaining a lot to her chat. Anushka's now thinking. She doesn't look pumped about what's happening so far. It looks like Rachel's putting some pretty serious pressure on her and not too worried about her own time situation. She doesn't seem nervous about how much time she was using. She was choosing to use that time aggressively, looking for a way to create problems for white. That's a very good sign. Being willing to spend your time to find moves you think are good, to have some confidence. White could play F5. They don't have to immediately go after this. They don't have to play Rook H2 or Bishop F1, anything like that. They could play F5. But then the black king probably comes to G5 and holds both pawns. So then both sides have two isolated passers for the moment. Rook H2 was the choice. And yeah, I imagine black's plan here is knight F4, Rook H4, King G5. I would mostly give props to Rachel so far this game for really giving us the feeling that black has an advantage, just like both of them were talking about. Rachel has impressed with her ability to make some transitions and put real pressure on white here. So these two players might not be endgame noobs. So far they're doing just fine. Knight F4, Rook H4 comes quickly. Yeah. It is also very good to play some moves quickly, you know. You know you're going to take this pawn, so take it. That was the plan when thinking about Rook H2, right? So this is good time usage from Anushka. She thinks for a while about this choice between Rook H2 and probably F5 and Bishop F1. And when she makes her choice, she doesn't hesitate on her follow-up. Yeah, DJ Connell, definitely expecting King G5 for black now. I'm not sure what Rachel would be thinking longer on this move, because that seems really clearly to be the right move. There it comes, King G5 now. They're friends, so I wonder how competitive they feel, how much they would hate to lose, or how excited they would be to win in this little mini endgame match with each other. There was some trash talk from the get-go, so I think there is definitely a little bit of competitive spirit here. So, yeah, white's got to back up the rook to H2 or H1. Not clear how big a difference it makes. And then we assume black's probably going to play H4, and white has to come up with a plan to improve some piece of theirs, right? I guess black has a pretty clear plan to go h4, h3, defended by the knight, then play king h4, king g3. Right? And whew, looks like a killer pawn. Is there still hope for white? Maybe now that we've captured one pawn, we have to swing the rook out to h8. The problem is if black goes rook h5, I'm afraid the minor piece endgame might be lost because these pieces are so far away from the progress the h-pawn's making. Weird move from black. So here, and here was a question. h3, rook takes h2, rook h8, king h4. This is a line that they may not have calculated all the way to the end as they were playing, right? King h4, so here rook h8, rook h5 wins for black. Bishop g6 would be the last trick in this variation for white. And then let's see you go rook h5 for black. Bishop takes h5. And oddly, you still get a competitive endgame, right? It goes on from here. Still not won or lost. Honestly, white should have a good chance to draw that endgame. So h4. I mean, I wonder if black was afraid of this. There's a chance that knight d3 followed by h3 wins here. But does the piece sack not work? No, it should work. We just have to go to a dark square. That'll definitely win it. I shouldn't say definitely because these things are always complicated. It feels like that would end the variation in black's favor. So anyway, to me, h4 was the key move. We get knight d5, which is surprising and maybe hopeful for white. I guess black wants the king to move forward. Bishop e2 from white after really long thought. And, I mean, for now, if king f4, there's rook h5. You think bishop e4 could have been a better move here, maybe? Yeah, I mean, I really don't understand knight d5. It seems like the best move is going to be to come back to f4. This knight looks like it's on the best square on the board. But it's transferring to e3. This bishop could go back to d3, but Anushka wants the possibility to, like, change something, right? She wants some ability to improve her position or force some action. And Davo's telling me that f4 was the move right here. f4, king f4, and then I imagine you want to take on h5. And check, and here, and here. It's plausible. It's plausible. Yeah, we're definitely playing for a draw if we're white. That much is clear. Here, black played h4 and white threw an f4 check. So that's going to trade off that pawn. White's going to be very happy about that. And in fact, to defend this pawn, black might have to go to e5. So black has to now decide how they feel about a rook trade. Let's say Rachel... My feeling is Rachel's face says she thinks she blew it a little bit. Yeah, I have to stop looking at the board to check their faces, so I can't give you the facial... I can't give you my own read on the facial reactions in real time as they're playing usually. Oh, maybe I can rearrange my tiny screen just a little bit better. King e5's been played. And white goes very quickly with this next check. Is she confident about the rook trade? No, she's just going to give a bunch of harassing checks. Interesting. I think probably the rook trade was draw-ish. I think probably the position's drawn with or without the rook trade now. So she sort of offers a position repetition. Rachel does. Small laugh from Anushka. Now, Anushka often tries to avoid draws to insane degrees. I've seen a few of her games. Did a profile on her chess play once. She's very aggressive normally about winning. But yeah. If she wants to win, she has to keep all the... Well, in general, if you're trying to win, keeping more pieces on the board maximizes your chances to outplay the opponent in a drawn position. But if you don't trade these rooks, then your bishop is stuck, right? Trading the rooks would let her bring her bishop out. For the moment... For the moment, I don't see any kind of winning idea, but we see after 2 repetitions that Anushka's using all her time. She's not quick to take the draw, even though she's been defending this whole time, right? I mean, when she made the choice to play f4 check and trade off these pawns, that was a relief for her and an upset moment for Rachel, which again revealed why the knight was better on f4 than e3, right? This pawn move, right? Wouldn't have been possible with the knight on f4. But certainly she knew at that point that she was kind of hoping for a draw. But now she hesitated a lot because she's not pumped about it, despite having been defending for the entire 18-move game up to this point. I don't see anything really for either of them to do here anymore. To try and keep a win possible. But I guess if I were white and I wanted to win, I would have made the rook trade and then kept my bishop. And I mean, there's no way to ever do anything though, because this pawn I can only attack with my king and their king can always defend it. No, I don't see anything to do. All right, maybe I'll pull a Jesse and tell them we can agree to a draw. Jesse would always come into old Endgame Sensei games while I was obstinately looking for a draw or a win or something, and he would come in and he would say, "Give it up, Bruce! Stop the game! Resign!" or agree to a draw or whatever he wanted me to do. All right, they get the 3-fold repetition. Let me turn my mic back on over there.
Hello?
Okay.
Hello.
Nice. So, 1 game in the books. And what are your thoughts about the first game, Rachel?
I think that I I think I just played h4 and then I like just kind of without thinking it through enough, and then immediately after I was like, wow, f4, and I think I lose all my advantage. So I wasn't happy about that move. I was thinking like, yeah, I don't know. I think instead of h4, I was looking at f4. And I wasn't exactly sure what to do because then I realized like all my pawns would be on light squares if I pushed g4.
So from her perspective, a different moment in the game.
Or yeah, a different moment. Yeah, a different moment in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So f4 early on is a different defense. She played h4, and you got to imbalance it with your very complicated f4 move.
Yeah, but I thought that if she played f4, I was nervous about what I would do if she played f4. Because I thought that like if I just took it, then it would just open up a rook, and then if I pushed, then it would lock everything, but then all the pawns would be on the light squares, which is probably good for the bishop. I think someone after the fact said like, I had an opportunity to trade the for the bishop on d3 at some point, and I didn't even consider it. And then I saw in the chat someone was like trade, and I was like, oh, why didn't I consider that? Because maybe like there's some kind of like bias because we initially talked about how like the knight was in a really good square. Yeah. And so I was like, keep it on that square, then why would I trade it? But maybe like I should have at least considered it. Yeah, those are some thoughts that I had.
Sure. Yeah. How about you, Anushka?
Yeah, I don't really know. I think h4 was interesting because my plan was to go f4 and like win the pawn, like trade those pawns anyway because I had my bishop and my rook pointing at h5. So I feel like if you were gonna go a different route, it should have been. I really thought you were gonna take my bishop, at some point, but then.
Oh, you're talking the later h4. All right, I'll get there.
Yeah. But
what about king f4? Maybe I should have played king f4 there, but yeah, we can look at it. But
okay, so Anushka is saying she's planning f4 followed by eliminating this pawn on h5. So if black didn't play h4, what did you think Rachel should try here?
I thought she was gonna go king f4 actually. That was one of the moves. I thought she was gonna king f4 and then knight e3, and then I was gonna have to like make some magic happen. But like maybe at least I have an open file. I was honestly gonna go like rook g1, rook g8, and like try to attack stuff from behind and cause some mayhem. Yeah, that was my whole plan with this position.
Yeah. Cool. So very good. I like that you're sharing your ideas really freely. Sometimes when you're gonna rematch somebody in the same position, there might be an instinct like, oh, I shouldn't like tell them everything I thought of, But the way you get better at the position the fastest is to share your ideas very freely in between games, even though you're going to play multiple games against somebody else when you do an endgame sparring like this. So I'm going to point out one or two little things just to speed you along a little bit. So I would say that the knight on f4 was on a seemingly optimal square, and then Rachel moved it back to d5 and to e3, and that is surprising. Well, I mean, you didn't think it was on its best square, obviously, the way I thought it was already on its best square. Otherwise, you wouldn't have moved it, right? But moving that knight away gives white this option of f4 at some point. It sort of opens up a little space for white. And where your knight was on f4 before you play knight d5, right? From here, it's blocking the f pawn, which is on a bad square, right? Anushka's bishop is partly suffering from that pawn being on that particular square. It's cutting off a lot of the bishop's options. So the knight's blocking that pawn move. The knight is keeping the white king from ever playing king d3 to try and, bust out in the middle and make progress somewhere else or cause some action away from the h-pawn. And the knight's even covering, one of the squares that helps the pawn to queen. So the most direct line there would have been h4, h3, which looked pretty promising. But if you didn't want to do that, I imagine you could also look at some ideas to maybe improve your rook first, such as either rook c8 to h8, or rook e5 to e3. Honestly, I didn't think of either of those rook maneuvers during the game because I think it's natural to have kind of that sometimes when you have a clear strategic idea, it can kind of tunnel vision you, right? Like you think your knight is your advantage, so you never look at knight takes d3, right? And I basically never looked at knight takes d3. You think the h-pawn might be winning, you just start looking at pushing it instead of an idea like rook e5, rook e3. I don't know. But if we try to come up with more ideas, if h4, h3 doesn't work, then my next thought would be to improve my rook before I would think of repositioning the knight on f4, which looks super good right here.
Yeah. No, you say all this now. I'm like, this is so obvious. Like, why? What was I thinking? Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, and then as you say, when you played h4, allowing f4, maybe instead of that, a move like king f4, could be a way to keep the game going because you keep that bishop sort of trapped, and so you still have this h-pawn, which is super dangerous. And I guess the main plan here is king g3, and then pushing the h-pawn.
Yeah.
But it seemed with the knight on f4 that it was even stronger to go h4, h3, king h4, and then maybe king g3. That seemed like the apex of your position.
Right.
And now just a little tidbit for you, shared from chat. On move 2, there's a little tactical pattern I want to make sure that you know just for your future games. If white plays king c1 in this position, black can go knight c2, bishop c2, d3.
Oh.
I think that's just a matter of, warming up. Like you're just getting into playing, right? Your engine's cold. And it could also partly be that a lot of people don't think strategically and tactically at the same time. So sometimes you look at a position, you're like, I've got all the time in the world. It's an end game. What square should I ideally put my knight on and my king on? And which pawn should I advance? And what structure do I want? And you're thinking about all this stuff 30 moves down the road, right? And then you're not thinking about the little move-by-move tactics. So that can happen. And vice versa. People are just calculating all the time, may not notice the most obvious of intuitive things about the action because they're in that mode. And combining the two ways of thinking is pretty tricky.
I didn't even consider knight c2, and now I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
No, me neither.
Why not? Why didn't I consider that?
Yeah. So that was a great first game. And I think with that little discussion, you're well equipped to do a rematch. And Anushka can take black now.
Yes,
Oh, boy.
I will send it.
Do you have any tips for Anushka before we start? I know you had some comments for black, but what about... Okay.
Okay. You want to discuss more before we start?
No, it's okay, but yeah.
It's true. I got a lot of good stuff, and I was like,
I'm just saying that really... you mentioned a lot of things from my side. And
okay. Let's mention some things from white side. So, you mentioned the idea of maybe playing f4 instead of h4 and keeping the pawn structure symmetrical, not allowing that passed pawn. I also feel like in a lot of the game, the pawn on f3 was one of white's biggest problems, kind of making their bishop not very mobile. Yeah. So that's a strong consideration for an improved defense for white, right? Would be to play f4 at some point. And honestly, it's a candidate move from the moment black plays f5 onward. So should be thought really seriously. When I was watching the game after f5, I considered immediately maybe playing f4 for white.
Okay.
Good to know. Yeah. Maybe this time I will play f4 as white.
Yeah.
All right, I'm playing as black.
And that's also something that you can do with these sparring games is like you may come up with an idea for white after a game where you've played black. Or sorry, where you've just played white. And you could share the idea with the person you're sparring with. They get to take advantage of your idea and be the one to play it, right? It helps them, win the little match with you, but it's pushing your understanding of the position forward faster together, right? So, yeah, you can definitely use each other's ideas.
Okay. Okay, I should have sent. I think.
Bouncing said it perfectly in the chat. Anushka, here are all these ways to win. Rachel, I don't know, maybe at some point.
Oh wait, I lost. Wait, the challenge. Oh, okay, never mind. It's gone. All right, I'll mute.
All right.
Oh yeah.
Good luck,
mute.
soldier.
Okay, good luck, soldier.
Hello, Dawn.
All right, so we're to game 2, folks. Let's see if I get everything up so I can see it all. All right, so we started with the same first 2 moves. The bishop saves itself. The pawn goes to a5. Now it's on white. They're both now aware of king c1, knight c2, I think. So they might have to deviate their move order already at this point. Candidate moves, rook e2 and rook g1. Maybe b3, which is a little committal, but it could be. I suppose even a3 could be a candidate move. We haven't really discussed this move yet. a3, the idea of takes just to be able to, maybe move up with the king at some point. Yeah, white could play for a3, or they could literally just play it right now. Doesn't look obviously losing or anything. Rook here, white's able to defend the pawn. Nothing decisive happens. So we get h3. Interesting move from Rachel, I guess. She's thinking of playing f4 at some point, avoiding knight g4, and for now she's scared to cross and doesn't yet have a plan for crossing the king. 1800 strength in some position like this, where you go king b2, rook b1, king c1. Normally knight c2, bishop c2, d3 won't win because of rook b2. Just recapturing on c2 and trading everything. It depends if black's had so much time to set up like a breakthrough on the king's side, but that's a little hard to do. And your king's going to be close to the a pawn, so probably it'll be okay. Black would have to be very advanced for that to be a problem for white, I think. Okay, so we get h5 here without f5 this time from Bloodqueen. This is a big difference. I have to stress, a big difference compared to how Rachel played the position. Here, if white plays f4, black has maybe an idea like h4. Takes, and the rook maintains this open 5th rank because this pawn hasn't advanced. So there's a little more maneuverability for this piece, and that means some extra option to actually attack this pawn and try and make it a problem, like even rook c6 to f6 could come in. So, and then actively, black's probably reasonably interested in trying h4 at some point themselves. Okay, rook e2. That supports c2 and lets the king join the game. And now, will Anushka play any slower with black, looking to set up her early plan here? Last game, she played a few of her initial moves pretty quickly with white, as if she was valuing a time advantage or trying to, put some pressure on the opponent. Sometimes you just want to make your opponent feel like you're strong, right? So you play some moves quickly, like, yeah, I see everything. I'm so good. I know what's going on. So she might have been trying to telegraph a little bit of that to Rachel. I think Anushka would like to be able to intimidate her opponents. I think that's one of the things she would like to be able to do when she plays chess. Maybe she has some fears herself while she plays. And then, how do we deal with fear? We try and make somebody else scared instead of us. So, but I'm very happy to see her spending time on this move, actually. So that's a really good sign. She's taking it seriously. And h4 looks reasonably strong. as 1800 points out, if we got h4 trades, the rook now doesn't have access to the open file. So it'll be black who will be threatening rook g5, rook g3 with, I want to say, just a decisive incursion. Doesn't feel like there's anything else going on enough on the board that would keep that from working, but maybe there'd be the c3 pawn break. You know, if we go here, 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 maybe in some case there's this pawn break because the knight is dangly, but check here, check. Might even just lose tactically. I don't know. Check here, here, and you defend the rook. You know, so. Oh, sorry. An even easier tactic. Rook d1 mate in 1. Yep. So, let's see. Okay, we got the move f5 instead. Gaining more space. So now against f4, black could maybe play h4. Against h4, black could maybe play f4. The h3 move, weakening this g3 square, I feel like it makes white's position worse. And I know we put Rachel in a tough spot because we didn't list a ton of great ideas for white during our discussion of the first game. And all she had to go on was don't play king c1, not do play x or y. So I know she was in a bit of a tough spot, but my first sense is that this h3 move makes white's position weaker. So, let's see. Now black's on the move and she's suffering. I mean, it was a big option for black to play h4 right here when rook g5 comes quickly. And maybe it would force white to play this move. The problem with this is that now if the black knight maneuvers to f4, that pawn is a real pain to defend. But I guess, for the moment, it's not that easy. King f6, controlling that square, preparing the knight maneuver. Maybe even a king going all the way and just leave the knight here. Oof. No, I mean, h4 was a huge consideration. But okay, f5 still leaves a lot of pressure on white. Gosh, I don't really like either of these options. Is f4 the better of them? Let's just look at this for a moment. f4 just got played from right under my mouse. Then this would maybe be the way. Trying to do this. Rook here stops the pawn in time. So that is a resource of Rachel's. No, DJ, I would say g4 is not a textbook move for black because g4 leaves the black pawn stuck on light squares. And honestly, white could trade or push. But, yeah, the bishop will always have this pawn to target. So it's doing something and anchoring this. Doesn't seem easy for white to make progress here to advance the king because the bishop's covering light squares, the pawn's covering dark squares. There's no road in for our king. The more classic thing to do is to try and create a route in for our king by breaking up the dark squares. If black can kick the white pawns off of dark squares, then the king can advance and become an active fighting piece while white's king is far away. So, Bloodqueen thinking a long time on this move, which is a critical one. But it looks like after h4 takes, Pawn takes f4 would simply lose that pawn. I'm not even going to talk about knight d5. Bishop f5, I guess. So black would maybe have to do this. And now the plan is to bring the rook to g3. That's kind of the main plan. But you can see that for the moment, the bishop and pawn are going to be able to keep the black king at bay. So that's not a dream for black. Another thing black could do is just simply move the king up. You know, that's definitely an option to f6 or g6. Just bring the king up, protect the pawn. If white takes, you take, and then you can always play h4 to imbalance the structure and make a passer. So you could hold the tension with king here, and white doesn't actually want to take. Maybe white would try this, and that would finally force black to make the trade. Then I'd really rather my king weren't on this file. I need to play this move faster. So let's go king f6 here instead of g6. Let's prefer that. Just in general, the g file is of greater importance here. White should maybe play king c1, just waiting. But let's say they play h4, forcing the issue. We trade, and go here. And there's no rook g2. So now the king comes out and the rook switches over here. And we can see that white is on the defensive to the point of probably losing. And black could also come here and go after those pawns. So the g file is going to be huge. Let's see if we got a move just now. f4 in the game, gf4, gf4, king f6. Okay. So now I think white has time, rook e1, rook g8, rook g1, to be first to the g file, right? That's kind of nice. You know, whichever rook first gets to the only truly open file on the board, right? Since these central files are kind of open, but they're also locked together by these pawn-defended bishop and pawn-defended knight. This is going to be worth a lot. The one fully, truly unblocked open file on the board for the rooks. Whoever gets it is huge. So the difference between this position and the one that I showed before where black had rook c8 already is huge. So white doesn't quickly go for rook e1, rook g1. I think this is a mistake. I think you just have to go for that file. That's the most pressing thing on the board. And Anushka goes presumably towards that file. We're going to make charitable assumptions about her intentions until anything proves us wrong. And we're going to imagine that she's rushing to that file and grabbing it. And Rachel has to wipe some sweat off her forehead as we see that rook coming in. Or maybe it's just hot in Los Angeles in period, because Anushka's also going like this. I mean, it was pretty warm in NorCal today. Yeah, the file is where it's at. I think it's worth at least a full pawn just to seize the file first in this position. So you can think of it like, if there were a pawn to capture in this position, would you capture the pawn or do something else first? You'd capture the pawn. Well, I think the rook file is worth a similar amount. I wondered about that question of yours, Shach Granola. Yeah, I wondered about that too. So the question is, had white gone rook e1 headed for g1, could black play knight g2 with the idea of knight f4? Get the rook to come here and then start improving black's rook like this. Maybe so, but to some extent, this file might be trash as long as you have your own knight on g2. And if you have to move the knight away to threaten rook g8, the moment you move it away, white could take it. So I'm not sure if knight g2 is definitely viable. I'm not sure if the mechanics work out that you have a way to take over the file with your knight sitting on the file. Although hilariously, it does say that white shouldn't go rook f3 heading to g3, because then you go rook g8 and they don't have rook g1 available. They have to kind of sit here waiting on rook g1. Oh, it looks like Rachel's in huge time trouble. Let's see, rook c7, king d2, rook to the open file. Good job, Anushka. And now, I mean, c3 is like the main thing you would think you would try here. She goes rook f2 with a few seconds left on the clock. Black's got 2 minutes. Nice position. I would consider h4. That's called fixing a weakness, folks. When there's a bad pawn, sometimes you play h4 to keep it there. Previously, it's more important to first seize the file. You don't play overly fancy moves. You need to get to the file first. That's worth more, right? Because, you know, if white spends their time on h4, fine. You know, you spent your time bringing the rook to a good square. So that works out, right? But now you could be wasting your time chasing it with rook g3, h4, rook g4. So maybe you just play h4, getting closer to queening. You know, and then rook g3 next. It also depends on whether or not c3 is an issue, whether Anushka wants to do something to prevent it. How big a deal would this have been last move? If takes, there's king takes. That move looks really, like, not obvious, right? Looks super complicated. I think you have to try that. Even if you got 5 seconds on the clock, I think you just have to try this move. I don't know. Rook g2. Dreaming of rook takes, and knight takes f4. But this is the wrong kind of idea, honestly, when you've got the file. Your rook is worth more than white's. This is not the most logical way to press black's advantage, I guess. What were they worried about with rook g3, for example? It defends the knight, which stops the c3 thing, and it goes after this pawn. I don't know. Rook g2. King e1. Trading. What? Oh, grabbing the pawn. Okay. King g3. Knight b2. Bishop e2. How much is black calculated? King g6. King h4. Very, very instinctively illogical to use the rook trade as your attempt to improve your advantage here when you've got this file. Unless you have 100% everything is simple and calculated and done. You know, rook g3 and h4, those two moves look so strong here. One of them feels like it has to be the right move. It'd be a real shocker if something else were better. Does Rachel still feel some hope? She goes king g3. If knight takes bishop here, black can go for knight a4, knight c3. You know, counterplay, give the h-pawn, take the a-pawn. Maybe you even go king g6, king h4 as part of that. Get checked, have your king go to h6. So it's really blocking the pawn and the king's stuck on h4, blocking the pawn. And then, you know, work on this knight maneuver. Yeah, I think I would throw in king g6 probably, but we could calculate a little bit. To see if that's superior. If knight a4... Bishop h5, knight c3. The a-pawn's just dead where it stands. Maybe that's simple enough. That was too much general thinking from me and not enough calculation. Whereas king g6, king h4, knight a4, check, king here. That's 2 king moves, and then bishop f7 defending the a-pawn. So it's simpler to go knight a4, knight c3. Win that pawn, give the counterplay. This h-pawn's not really getting past your king very easily because white's king is never breaking through the position. Yeah, so knight a4, correct. So Anushka supersedes my instinct there and looks concretely and finds the right continuation. It looks like it'll be just enough to win for black, despite me hating her rook trait earlier. Is d3 possible? I suppose so. I don't like it, though. You want to do some kind of weird breakthrough, but you're sacking like so many of your pawns. If you want to do that, maybe come here first, and if white plays this, then go for a breakthrough. Like that. That could be winning. So you could play a4 here, planning to bring the pawn to a3, just getting closer to queening and setting up for a breakthrough like d3 eventually. And white could go here with the king then. And maybe if you do this and get the king all the way here, now we could use your breakthrough idea. Yeah, I mean, reconfiguring your idea and just prioritizing the a-pawn moves, this might be a killer idea. So more analysis would be needed, but they've got 30 seconds per move, so we're going to keep looking here. So white brings the king towards this pawn. Against knight c3, white's going to play bishop c4, so black can't win with the a-pawn. Or not immediately, you know, they're going to need a fancy breakthrough. There is a breakthrough to be had, by the way. Knight here, bishop here, a4. I'll just make a move to set it up and then show you d3. So if the bishop takes, knight a2, right? And if pawn takes, you go knight a2. Bishop here, b3. Bishop here, a3. And you just win. So black can force a breakthrough against this bishop on c4 still right here. They could also play king g6 and keep white's king at bay if she doesn't have enough time to calculate this whole breakthrough idea. But it does look straight up winning to push this thing. Yeah, but she just plays king g6. She says no counterplay, really. She's up a pawn, and she'll have time to advance the a-pawn soon. Is the starting position from a famous game? No. It's going to be revealed at some point here, but the starting position is from a game of Anushka's. She did not seem to remember it when we discussed the evaluation at the top of the show. So we'll see. We'll see if she knew all along and was just didn't happen to mention it. There's no cruelty here, DJ Connell. This is entirely supportive of me. Everything I've done here for them in preparing for this show and executing it, I have had nothing but their best interests in mind throughout. This is the best training I can provide. All right, king backs up. Knight chooses to reposition. Interesting. So I think the idea is to get the king away from the h-pawn and then be able to repurpose her own king once there's no counterplay. But I think she doesn't see this idea of a4, d3 as a breakthrough. That's an unusual breakthrough, you know. There are some breakthroughs that are, 1200 level, like if you had none of these pieces here and just a pawn on a3. The most basic chess breakthrough would be, b3, pawn takes, pawn a2. And 1200s will know one or two breakthroughs like that, maybe. But this idea of a4, d3, because the bishop's on a2, pawn takes, knight a2, sacking the knight, and then trapping the bishop with the pawns is a more advanced one. The king commits! She tries to harass this bishop. I don't know how much I believe in this. I mean, bishop will come here, maybe looking at this. What's the idea? Does she have a plan? The time situation suggests that Anushka does have some threatening idea, and Rachel's scared of it, and she sees it, because she would run down her clock if she didn't see anything good to do. But I don't see what she's up to. bad sign for me. Bishop b5. What's happening next? Gets played. Maybe she's going to e1. And then bishop a4, d3, just sort of chipping away at the position. Not like super convincing to make a pawn trade. Again, she doesn't have the same endgame instincts as I do about what to trade or not trade, but she is sort of move by move finding enough good ideas to keep pressure on the opponent. Yeah, I don't know of like a single collection of all endgame breakthroughs or something like that. But certainly different people have put together series of them that show some of them. I don't know if you could show all of them, right? Because there'd be a lot. But okay, knight f3 check. Yeah, so that's what I suspected her idea was. I think she's coming here next. You know, a book that tries to talk about all endgames will have a section on breakthroughs, a section on fortresses, a section on piece activity, a section on, you know, pawn structure weaknesses, a section on trades. So, I mean, breakthroughs are one of the fundamental backbones of endgames. Definitely. I'm just thinking a long time here. Then executes her plan. So, the threat is knight c2. And bishop d3, knight d3 is just over as a king and pawn ending, right? So I think it'll be bishop a4 pretty quickly. Gives the check first. Interesting. So here, black could even just go king f6 because bishop h5 is not happening. King h6 is okay too, but then, you know, if white plays bishop d7... at some point, you can't keep both of these pawns defended with the king at once, right? That's part of this bishop getting loose in the endgame and you having pawns on light squares as black. Well, Rachel's really happy about something. It can't be her position, can it? Maybe somebody bet her she wouldn't be able to give check this game before she lost. Or she just enjoys it. All right, king f6. I agree with that move. Then immediate bishop a4 and d3. And I figured by process of elimination this had to be Anushka's plan because what else is the knight doing on g1, right? Otherwise it's going to be trapped by king f1. The knight on e1, right? So it has to be d3 is the point. And that's just opening up a little more room for the knight to maneuver around. It's next going to go to c1 if given the chance. She could set up a slightly simpler version in a moment perhaps of the breakthrough that I was talking about, like this. And I think here it should still work, right? Even without those extra pawns. It doesn't matter how much space the bishop has. The pawns just can't be stopped at that point. So, say cd3 played. And in this position, black's threatening knight c1, and the pawn can't be defended. That's why I played bishop b3 in order to go onto this diagonal. You can also play a move like, you know, bishop b5, and then on knight c1, bishop c4. But similarly, I mean, a4, what'll white have to do? Attack the a pawn instead of defending this pawn? Because the pawn's worth more than the knight at this point. That'll be like the toughest defense at that point. It would be something like bishop b5, knight here, bishop here, pawn here, bishop here. But it's too late. Black can just break through no matter what. Now instead of knight a2, right, and you've lost control of all the light squares. This is very important in terms of how bishops operate. That's why white plays bishop here. They want your pawn not to control light squares, right? But there's still just this b3 breakthrough. Pawn takes a2 and it gets passed. So, yeah, I think Anushka's just winning, actually, with her plan, it seems to me. Knight d3. Rachel's thinking here down under 20 seconds. It feels like we will get a first breakthrough for black this game. Bishop b5 attempted. Knight c5, not the direction I anticipated at all. No. So Anushka definitely needs to know about these breakthroughs. That is like a real deficiency here. She's got 2 minutes on her clock. I feel like from Rachel's time usage, she saw these breakthroughs, and that's why she's using so much time, because she's like, I'm dead. But you have to be able to see the end at this point when it's just 2 or 3 pieces on this side. And the concept of using a breakthrough seems to be not even on her mind, and white goes for counterplay again, saying if you're not going to break through, let me do something in the meantime and keep you distracted from thinking about the breakthrough, right? Keep you from focusing on the king side. A4. Yeah. That's the right side of the board. That looks pretty winning. Knight c1 was like 2 tempi better because of the threat to a2, but I mean, there's still just the threat of b3, pawn takes b3, a3 here, right? Winning the game, so. White is, 7 moves away from doing enough here. King takes h5 with 2 seconds left. She sees her doom, but correctly waits to see if Anushka can find it all. Yeah, b3. Looks good. Now, if ab3, it's rather important to push past and not take. So I would trade and see if she does it. She trades! Oh no! Bishop c4, b2, bishop a2. Incredible. So really just a total blind spot for breakthroughs. Never heard of them, more or less. Because here we're just, 1 move away from queening a pawn. Yeah. Rachel finds the way. Brings the bishop around. This knight will probably go to c3. Bishop has to spend time going to b1, knight c3, bishop c2. Because you can't afford to get your bishop chased off the diagonal and just let them queen, right? You have to sack your bishop for this pawn to stay in the game. I don't think black's winning easily. I think it's proving fairly difficult for black to win this endgame. I think they're probably still in position to win it, but yeah, I would not call it easy based on what I'm seeing so far. It seems like rook g2 and rook takes f2, followed by knight d1, knight b2, was just enough for black to be objectively winning throughout.
She's still going for 30 more minutes. Will you stop?
Knight c3, bishop d3. Yeah, so it seems black's been winning the whole time, but it required skill to show it. Wow, now she chooses not to cash in the pawn still. So she'll take this pawn with check. The king will probably come this way to keep this pawn alive. And then she'll move the knight back over to c3 to collect the bishop. I guess that's good. It's just interesting. Her mind has very different endgame instincts than mine. She definitely does things in different orders. Maybe this is a very good finesse, actually, in this case. Yeah, this seems like the square to head back to now. She's slowed down White's counterplay, which involves bringing the king to g8 and then the h-pawn up. And she's got the f-pawn ready to run. So there's no plan at all for White. This was actually a very clean solution, this knight d5 move. Yeah, very nice. That's pretty GG. I say again, but it's gone on for a while already. Yeah, there was nothing left to do other than this, because the next part of the plan is to bring your knight back to the side of the board. Because king and f-pawn can't beat king and h-pawn, so there's nothing more that black can do here to strengthen or improve their position on the king side, you know. And even just one wrong move could be enough to draw the game or whatever. So, in fact, there would be bishop takes f5, even worse in that variation. So knight takes b1. How do our contestants feel? I think they're pretty clear on the result at this point, you know. King heads back to this plan. King g6 shuts it down completely, which might be Anushka style, but also you can just bring the knight back, and White's a million moves too slow to do anything. All right, and that will do it. It brings us our first decisive game here. Okay.
Hello.
Hey.
Hello. So, how did that go, Anushka?
You know, I'm glad that she resigned, because I honestly was scared that I was gonna like blunder that into a drawn king pawn and game or something. But yeah, I thought it went okay. Not the cleanest, but okay.
Mm-hmm. Did you feel like you were winning the whole time that you were up a pawn, or were you not certain?
No, I felt like I was winning. I felt like I was having trouble. I would like come up with a plan, and then she would make a move, and then my plan would be like foiled for like a few moves, and I was like, oh, I have to come up with something else now.
Yeah.
But I never felt like I wasn't winning. Just I wasn't seeing it.
That makes sense. That does get exhausting over time playing an endgame, and that's part of what a classical chess battle is, right? When you're against somebody who's pretty closely matched, is you have to come up with a plan, and then something goes wrong. You have to come up with another thing, and it's just slowly the fatigue layers, both emotionally and mentally, as you go through all those things. Yeah. What do you think, Rachel? Was it winning once she won a pawn?
Yeah, I just felt like I was like on my heels the whole game, just like, you know, trying to hang on. Yeah, I don't know. I had like 2 seconds all of a sudden. I was like, I don't know. Like, you know, after rook g7, I really didn't know what to do. Yeah. I was like really stuck there, and I was like, oh wow, I need to just make a move. So I just like made a move. And then, you know, I knew that they was forcing the rook trade. I didn't see the fork. And I was like, okay, maybe I can try the h5 pawn, which she defended really well. And I thought, I don't know, I thought the like when the knight was on c3, I really thought she was just gonna promote. But then, you know, when she came and took the f4 pawn, I thought it was really clean. I thought it
Yeah.
was really cool.
Yeah, actually,
Yeah.
knight d5 surprised me, and then I had to say, oh, yeah, that was actually maybe cleaner than what I would have done.
Yeah, no, it was really clean. I was like, wow, this is a really nice way to end. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think playing what was it? Like, playing knight e2 at the end too, just like cutting my king from going to g3. It was just like a nice extra sauce. I don't know. I think she ended it really well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and but one interesting thing you said at the beginning, I think when rook g7 got played early on, that's where you started to really feel that your position was coming apart.
Yeah. I mean, also, like, I didn't know after f5 when we had the 3 pawns staring at each other.
Yeah.
I didn't. I mean, I didn't know how to make progress. Maybe
Mhm.
there I should have just played like king c1, king d2, but I didn't know if I wanted to allow her to make the decision on where the pawns were gonna go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wasn't
Yeah.
sure how to proceed really.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're somewhat better off playing f4 than letting her play f4.
Yeah.
Based
That was
on,
kind of the conclusion that I came
Yeah.
to. Yeah.
based on what we've seen so far, but it's not something that we've proven yet, right? So that's at a level of a theory still. And a lot of times with these endgames, what you'll want is you're sharing knowledge, but also theories, right? So you could tell your opponent there's this one tactical pattern. You can't play king c1, knight c2, right? Without having the rook able
Yeah.
to go to the second rank. So you
Yeah.
set it up with rook e2 that you could cross the king over. You could also put the rook on a square like g1. And if they do knight c2, bishop c2, d3, you have rook to g2, right? So there's different ways to set it up, right? So you could share stuff that's
Yeah.
basically you're sure of, right? Like
Yeah.
we have to watch out for king c1, knight c2. But then you also have theories, right? Like I think that either player would want to put their pawn on f4. So before black does, white should, or something like that, right? And then that's something where you're not sure, but what you try and do is you try and play like 2 games with the white pawn on f4, 2 games with the black pawn on f4, and then you start to hone in on that theory, right?
Yeah.
From actually playing it out.
Could you talk a little bit more about why you're so sure that some side wants to put the pawn on f4?
Right. So, a big difference between this game and the other one, even after rook g7 happened and even after she was up a pawn, is that we could feel the power of the white bishop, which we never felt in the first game. So even though this game white lost, right, we felt the light squared bishop hitting h5, coming out to b3, a4, e8, hitting the pawn on h5. There was a moment, kind of cool, where bishop e8 check got played. Let's see, it was before this. Yeah, right here. Bishop e8 check got played at like move 19. And if black plays king h6, in theory, white can just keep playing bishop d7, right? And we could see that the bishop has so much room and scope that you can't actually completely shut down all counterplay, right? So Anushka had to be confident and do the calculation work enough to be willing to say, okay, I'm going to sack one of these pawns at some point to continue my play on the queen side, right? So we felt the power of the bishop for the first time. And to me, that's partly because there wasn't a pawn on f3 hampering that piece. In that first game, as long as the pawn was on f3, the bishop was just unable,
Right.
It was just a dud. It couldn't do anything about the passed h pawn. The moment white sacked f4 and got the pawn off f3, everything worked out. So, so that's like a big piece of it is I feel like, and then another piece is just in general, if your pawn is on f4 as white and your bishop is a light squared bishop, the black king can't penetrate the position. Anushka had to win the game just off the rook and knight, right? Her king never got in and did anything. Whereas in your game where you had black, we thought there were a couple potentially winning plans for you of bringing the king through g5 to f4 to g3 or h4, h3, king h4, king g3. There were routes for the black king to just come forward, and white had to scramble in some way because the king on c1 and the black king comes into g3, like you've lost, right?
Yeah.
In any position with the pawn on a dark square and bishop on a light square, you actually have the possibility of blocking out the enemy's king.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's still a theory. I don't know for sure. I can't prove it. And I think there's an interesting question about the timing of it. Because if you just rip f4 on basically the second move of the game or something, like bishop
Right.
d3, a5, f4, black has gf, GF, rook h5. And I'm not sure of the consequences of that for white. Because that black rook just starts attacking all your pawns. It's just so active.
Right.
So there may be a thing where as white you want to wait for black to play f5, putting a pawn on a light square that your bishop will be able to attack forever, and blocking the rook's access to the king side.
Right.
And then as soon as it's on f5, maybe there you go f4.
It's insane that none of these thoughts went through my and you're saying it now, I'm like, it makes so much sense that this is not what's going on.
Yeah. Now, again, it makes sense, and in practice, it might not work. When I'm thinking strategically and listing ideas like that, I might be blundering like all kinds of simple tactical reasons why you can't actually play it in this position or that position. Yeah. One thought I had is that I did not like the h3 move for white. I felt like that weakens your dark squares.
Yeah, I just like really struggled to come up with what to do.
Yeah, I know
I
we'd
think
like.
I was like, okay, I need to move, and I need to move something, and I was like, I can't move the A pawn, I can't move the B pawn, I can't move the C pawn, I can't move the king. Like, you know, I
Right.
should have just played rook g1. I should have totally just played rook g1.
Yeah, you're in almost Zugzwang,
yeah.
but maybe this mysterious rook
Yeah.
move that Anushka used in the first game, rook g1, which kind of fights against both f4 and h4 as plans for black.
Yeah.
I think it was a really clever idea she had in the first game, but I know we threw you into this game with like, here are 5 ideas for black to win better, and for white, and for white, don't play king c1 because it loses. Well, that doesn't tell you what to play, right? So I know it was tough.
No, I think rook g1 would have been
But I
much
think a
better
useful
alternative.
point that this h3 move means that if black ever plays f4 or h4, that's enough to collapse all white's dark squares. One pawn to either of those squares, and it's immediately like tactically forcing and positionally amazing for black.
Can you explain that a little bit more? How h3 collapses the dark squares, or like?
Yeah, so I mean, in a situation like h5, rook e2, f4, when you play f4, right? If black plays h4, if your pawn were on h2, so this is move 4 after you played f4. If she had played h4, if your pawn were on h2, you could play like fg5 or any move you like.
Right.
But because your g-pawn's hanging, you're just you're forced into some kind of tactical scrambling immediately. And most of these positions are going to be amazing strategically for black. I think in this game, we calculated that you had the plan of GH, GF, rook F2, capturing the F4 pawn immediately, and you were okay.
So you mean after, F4, H4?
Yeah. In the game, she played GF4, right? And I think we were calculating that had she played H4, you could trade on H4, and if she takes on F4, you have rook F2.
Rook F2, and I'm okay.
And you capture that first pawn before it gets out of hand. But if black's king were already on F6, they would play king E5, and I assume you're lost. It's kind of like the breakthrough that you used in the first game, right? Where you created the imbalanced pawn structure to make a pass pawn faster on the king side. And honestly, for all I know, black could lose that F pawn and maybe still have a good position. King F6, rook F4, king E5, rook F2. Rook C7, and black
doesn't look too fun.
Black's going rook G7 or rook H7. Your king's still a long way from being good. And the F pawn looks pretty good. I mean, maybe that's still good for black, right?
Yeah.
But there we need to calculate a 6 or 7 move variation, and for the moment, we'll just say the pawn on H3 means that all of these things are more critical, right? Anytime she plays F4 or H4, you just have to react in a different way. And often just holding the dark squares is how you would ideally react, and that's just not even one of your options.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. That's insane that you saw all of that from H3.
Well, that's sort of like an experience thing, right?
Yeah.
And one of the main ways that I think about chess, and bear in mind that every way that someone thinks about chess is not just a shortcut that allows them to like think of something brilliant in 10 seconds that normally you'd have to think 20 minutes about, but it's also a bias that's going to freeze out other things and cause them to miss things, right? So every piece of knowledge is a double-edged weapon. But I think about things a lot of the time in terms of color complexes, you know, and how the bishops and the pawns coordinate and what square you want your pawns to be on if your knight is likely to be on this square and stuff like that. So
No, I'd like to think more that way because I don't really think in color complexes. I mean, I'm not exactly sure what you mean by a color complex even. But
well, part of it is this idea that the dark squared pawns are going to blend better with the light squared bishop to provide a more full coverage of the board so that the black pieces don't have a bunch of safe squares to maneuver through at will.
Right.
Now, I have to tell you, too, about one other very important thing in this game. So f4 was played. Black took on f4. Right? Trades, king f6. Now, in this position, I'm fairly confident that the key thing is the open G file. That's the most valuable thing. Anushka agrees, and her next two moves were rook c7, rook g7.
Yeah, but I was expecting rookie one.
Yeah.
And then yeah.
So this is the kind of thing that you can learn from each other, right? Very good example. Like if you were just discussing this freely without me here, Anushka, it would be your responsibility after the game to tell Rachel, like, I really thought you would go rook e1, rook g1. Like, why did you not want the open file? You can say it however politely you want, but I mean, it's your responsibility. You have to tell her that the open file was kind of like en prise.
Yeah.
And she could have captured it and didn't, right? So,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why strategically I would never like play g takes f4. And I had to be concrete and like believe in myself that what I calculated was fine. So I was looking at g takes, king f6, rook e1, rook c7, rook g1, rook g7, and then I just made sure that there was no like. Eventually, all I had to make sure was that like the rooks were either getting traded or I was having the open file, and I didn't see any way that she could not do that. There was no like rook g5 or anything. So I thought this worked out well for me, and like I saw that my queen side was safe. I didn't really look at any pawn breaks on the queen side for her, so maybe that was a miss. But yeah, I thought this was fine. But otherwise, I like the open file is like your only way that you're gonna get counterplay against me. So it like felt in an abstract way like a stupid thing to do, but I thought it would work out okay.
Yeah. And did you think that after the rook trade you'd be winning or better, or you were just like, that's good enough, I have to go for this, I don't need to evaluate what's happening?
I thought I'd be winning because knight g2
Your
and
plan is to get
it's
this,
hard
right?
to defend this pawn.
Yeah. And I think, you know, for your level, you probably looked at the key ideas and calculated this far enough. If you had more time on the clock, I think before going in for this as black, since you have the advantage, you might check this move bishop e2, hitting the h pawn with the idea of transferring the bishop to f3, taking away your knight's roots to the pawn.
I looked at that briefly, but I didn't look at it enough or give it enough credit. Yeah.
So anyway, I mean, like with more time, you can maybe go a little bit deeper on some of these things as you get better, but that you anticipated rook e1 to g1 and were planning on how to deal with it. Perfectly good. The variation that I had considered for you before you took on f4, I had rejected h4, perhaps wrongly because of that rook f2 thing, but maybe that's like a genius thing black should do, is sack that f pawn, right? Just to get a passed pawn and muddle up the king side. Having not looked deeply enough at the h4 pawn sack, I guess, I had thought of king f6, just holding the structure and advancing your king, keeping the tension. Fg5, king g5 doesn't look attractive for Rachel because you'll always have this h4 breakthrough again. The g pawn's not protected by an h pawn, and so the f pawn will become a passer. Do you see the situation again here, Rachel, where if black's h3 pawn could go back to, if white's h3 pawn could go back to h2, black has no way to make a pass pawn on the king side?
Yeah.
And because it's on h3, we can force a passed pawn with his h4 break.
Yeah, and you can't defend it with the rook because the rook's on the second rank. And
Yeah.
the knight is holding it.
So that looks like a collapse for white. So I didn't anticipate that you would trade on g5. So I think there I looked at king c1. And then you'll have guessed this, Anushka. Having won a tempo, so to speak, in the trade of king f6 and king c1, I will now trade on f4 and play rook c7 to g7. And I believe you're winning if you get the full g file.
Yeah.
Can you say the moves again?
Yeah.
This is it after f4 h4 or
It's f4 king f6 on move 4.
Okay, got it.
And in this position here, I looked at h4 or king c1 for white. Right?
Okay.
And they're pretty similar. The point is black with the king on f6 is now ready to make the pawn trade and then transfer the rook.
Yeah.
And get to the g file first. And once they do, it's worth at least a pawn. They'll be able to attack some of these white pawns from the side and win one.
Yeah. I see that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. King f6 was the best thing I saw during the game, but maybe the h4 thing's even more genius. I don't know. King f6 seems pretty good.
Yeah, king f6 seems really nice. Just control the file and my rook is not doing anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And potentially, I traded on f4. If white played king c1, potentially you can even just go like rook c7, rook g7, because white doesn't even want to take on g5. So what do while you go and take the file, in advance?
True.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Cool. So normally you would probably play the game a couple more times, that same position, right? And sometimes in the chess dojo, okay. I originally came up with this endgame sparring, and I would have people basically play a position till they felt they both had mastery of it. So they would go back and forth, maybe 6 games, maybe 8 games, exchanging information between games, sometimes speeding up or slowing down the time control, depending on whether they feel they have mastery or not. Sometimes like once you feel you're playing the position well, you could then like speed it up and say, well, could I play this well with even less time? But Jesse really likes things to be super competitive. So the way he has it set up in the dojo now, and he won Kostia's vote on this, is that you have to win a 4-game match in some position. So if 2 players get together and they practice a position, one of them scores 2.5, they can check it off of their task list and move on to other things. The other person has to find someone else and keep working on it till they win 2.5 out of 4 consecutive games in the position. But I would say, normally, like, you've clearly learned some things playing this position, and you could clearly, like, practice it more and keep improving your skills around it. Not just the understanding of the strategic factors at the beginning of the game, but all the little just tactics that come up eventually as you play out a full game, right? Little techniques that come along. Anushka, you can check the recording later to see some little details of breakthroughs that you could use on the queen side. You did win the game without ever giving up your winning advantage, but I think there are some breakthroughs to make a new queen that you don't know about, little breakthrough tactics. And these are just useful things to pick up that we pick up by playing out a bunch of endgames. They may not be strategically related to the starting position, but they are still part of the point of doing endgame sparring. Is just playing a certain number of rook and bishop versus rook and knight positions. You're learning patterns and tactics and practicing when to calculate, when to use your time, every piece of it. Now, Anushka, you once had this position before, right?
As white?
As black.
Like just now?
No, before today, in a tournament.
What? Really?
Yes.
Oh my god. What? When? Wait, okay, sorry. Let me think about this.
Bomb drop. That's crazy.
Let me think of it. So it was a Nightorf?
It was a Nightorf.
I'm assuming it was a Nightorf.
Yeah. You had 2 knights
Pawn
against
on e6.
You had 2 knights against 2 bishops.
Oh, and I was up a pawn. It was against
Yeah.
that stupid. Sorry, it was against that kid. Very talented.
Very talented kid.
Yeah.
And in that game, you chose the plan A4, B3 for black. And just sort of gave a pawn on the queen side, which then white advanced up the board. And
No,
you,
it's all true.
yeah, and you lost
Yeah.
with black.
You know what's
So,
funny is I still said that as my first, like, those were the first two moves that I said, and I was like, oh no, that's stupid. I won't do that this time.
okay, you thought of a4. That was
Yeah.
an early instinct. Great.
Yeah.
So, the chess dojo, under its material, has a few training positions for you, right? But first of all, I thought you might already have done a couple of those positions with Matt, or I don't know, maybe.
Yeah.
Right? So I didn't just give you the position from your cohort. Secondarily, I wanted to show you here a very useful and satisfying way to come up with extra positions for endgame sparring, right? So anybody out there who feels they want to work more on their endgame and their cohort might have one or two of these kind of positions to spar, they might spar that position and then say, okay, so what do I do next, right? So the number one source of good other positions to spar is your own games. You take any endgame from a game of yours where you didn't feel very confident about how the game went, and you replay it. And it not only deepens your knowledge while being a position normally that you sort of care about, because you're like, this is my position, I care. I mean, in your case, today you didn't feel that, but very often one feels, this is my position, like I care about it, right? And so you remember it better than if it's somebody else's position, somebody else's game. Mm-hmm. And also it fulfills a psychological purpose, right? Because the last time you had this game, you lost it with black, and now you've won it with black, right? So you like take that position and you put it to rest, right? This was me before with that position. This is me now. I'm past it. If I had this position again in the future, I would beat the opponent. How many times do you hear chess players telling you stories about, I had that position, I should have won, I should have won, I should have won. They don't know if they would win, though. They still don't know if they might not lose that game again and again and again to that same genius kid, right? Now you know that you could win it next time.
That's a good feeling.
Yeah. So I like to take all my blown endgames and put them to rest by replaying them and beating some friend of mine, so that I can say, okay, that's my, endgame therapy as well.
Tharsis.
Wow. I've never thought of it like that before, huh?
Yeah.
I feel like, yeah, especially if you're really upset about a game, you're just like, all right, let's spar this, and then let me see the right way to do it, and then like you're almost like, learning from your mistakes.
Yeah. Chess players can be so whiny. They can complain on and on about the position they had, but why don't they just go actually play it out again and like try and improve on their mistake, right?
Yeah.
I think it's rare to find someone of the same rating though who would be willing to take the time to spar it with you though. Like I think it's super, like I'm super grateful to have Matt and have Anushka, like that we can do that. Because I don't know. At least for me, this has not been the case before where I can be like, like I can't believe I lost that, like, and then sit down with someone and spar.
Yeah.
I think it's rare to have chess friends like that.
Yeah, just call up your friend and have them work through it with you. Yeah. But have you asked lots of people before, or did you just assume that nobody was going to be there for you?
Well, I guess I just didn't have friends who were like my rating.
Yeah.
It was like, I think, yeah.
Girlfriends.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, just girlfriends especially.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Well, so there you go. You have it. And to everybody out there, there's probably lots of people out there watching this who think that they don't have a friend to do this with. Ask. It won't hurt you to ask. You may be surprised. You may find some people. Basically, this is how I got better at chess, was just certain people that I played in tournaments that maybe we did a post-mortem where we talked after the game and I was like, this seems like somebody I could be cool with. We just became chess friends after playing each other. And then we would practice or go through each other's games together and just get better. So
yeah,
it's partly why I emphasize that as a teacher, is those kind of collaborations with training partners.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
All right.
Can I show one cool thing in the position?
Yeah.
I don't know if this is what you're talking about when you're saying breakthroughs, but this was a line that I was looking at in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't go for it because I didn't believe in myself. But then Hayden texted me after, and he was like, "You should look at that line. Like, I think it was interesting." So it was on move 14 after you played bishop c4, and you're like
Yeah.
defending your pawn,
Mm-hmm.
and you're attacking my pawn on h5. So I was like, "Oh, I could defend my pawn," but then I don't know. I don't know what I thought. I was like, I could defend my pawn, or what if I go a4,
Mm-hmm.
and then if you take, I take your pawn, sack my knight, and then I go d3, and then if you take it, then I trap your bishop.
Yep.
Maybe. Yeah, but this just looks like a worse version of the endgame that I got eventually. But I think it also might work.
Well,
I don't
no,
know,
this
though.
this one here, you're up a queen, so it's very clean.
Oh wait, yeah, I'm winning the bishop. Okay, yeah. Like, what if they go here and then here? Oh, but they're not. Yeah, okay, then I have a queen. Okay, so this is much better actually than what I got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was the most complicated of the breakthroughs. But it's a super, super cool one. You can do it in the other order as well. After king h5, you can play d3.
Mhm.
And if the bishop takes, you play knight a2, which is obviously good for your a pawn, right? And
Yeah.
if the pawn takes, then you go knight a2. And then push the b pawn.
Huh, yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that
I didn't
was,
see nearly this far though, so
that was
I wasn't gonna go for that.
yeah, that was a beautiful one.
Yeah.
Very beautiful. I'm sure Hayden feels very good to have found it because it's very aesthetic and
No, I
a
found it. I
complicated
just
endgame.
I didn't trust it. I like went
Oh, I
as
thought you
far
said
as playing.
he texted you it or something.
Yeah, I was like showing chat the line with arrows, and I went as far as b3, and then I was like, I don't know.
I don't know.
And then
Okay.
he texted me afterwards, and he was like, you should look at it. Like, it
Yeah.
looks cool. So yeah.
It was super cool. Yeah, great. Okay, so you'll be figuring out those breakthroughs soon.
Hopefully,
Very
yeah.
nice.
Wait, sorry, can you just say the line one more time? I was like kind of
Yeah.
like looking at your stream for it, but just to
Oh,
yeah.
Sure.
yeah, bishop c4, and then if you take my a4, and then if you take my pawn on h5, then I sack my knight on a2, and then takes d3, c takes d3, b3, and then the bishop's trapped.
So knight e2, bishop takes e2, and then
No, knight a2.
sorry.
'Cause you-
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I was like, what? Okay. A2, bishop takes, and then
D3.
Yeah,
D3.
Threatening
yeah,
D2,
distraction.
D1, or DC and
Yeah,
C1.
that's really pretty. Holy, yeah.
Yeah.
I did not see any of that. Yeah, and you just win. That's really pretty. Yeah. Wow. Whew.
Would have been nice.
Yeah, if you did that, I would just be like, I would just bow down to you. I'm like, this is
Yeah.
just so pretty. Like, I can't.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna leave the pawn. Yeah, no, this is really nice.
Yeah, sometimes our opponents deserve for us to bow down to them.
Yes.
Other times
this
we
would
have
be
to
one of
dirty
those
swindle them
cases.
to keep them on their toes.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Oh well,
All right.
maybe another time.
Cool. So, if you enjoyed this, why don't you, Rachel, find a position from a game of yours, and we'll do this again sometime with an endgame that you once didn't do what you wanted with, whether it be try to win or try to defend and draw. Either way.
Okay. I can think of one. I mean, this is not the one I'm gonna choose, but I was sparring with Matt on Thursday, and there was a position that like I shouldn't have resigned, but it was basically like a queen against a bishop and 4 pawns.
Ooh.
Essentially, that's like the first thing that comes to mind. I think it was like
Yeah.
5v1 pawn wise, and then I had a dark square bishop, and Matt had a queen.
Yeah.
And I like. Yeah, no, I guess I just like panicked and like, you know, I don't know. I resigned with like a little bit before that, where like that's what it would transpose to. But now, and then I was like kicking myself after. I'm like, oh, I would have loved to spar that position.
Yeah. Okay.
But no, I'll think of one. I mean, we're both playing in the Chicago Open this weekend.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we'll have games from that for next time.
Yeah, that might be a fair choice, you know. And just a note to everybody, you don't need to overthink picking a position, right? Like, if you think, oh, this position's not like the perfect position, whatever. Like, worst case scenario, you pick a position and it turns out that the two of you can just solve it in 1 or 2 games. And then you're like, oh, yeah, we get it. That's fine. Then you just go on to another one. But you've quieted a question or a concern in your mind. You've learned something. Because from the moment that you wondered about that position, it was worth investigating at least once for you. And then you'll see.
I don't even know if I've ever thought of positions as like something to solve. Like you know, like, oh, I'm gonna look at this position until I've solved it. That's really cool. I don't know, maybe I'm not rated enough for that, but like,
Sure
I don't
you
know.
are.
There's so many positions where I look at it, you know, I'm like, okay, I see all these things, but I don't feel like I've solved it, you know. So that's really cool that you, I don't know, maybe I'll start thinking of things that way.
Yeah.
And then it's like, how do you know if you've, yeah. How do you know you've solved it?
Well, when neither of you has any more ideas, right? When you both agree. And that's one of the great things about having somebody else there, is it also helps you to be done at some point. Because when you're on your own, you have no double check. You never know if you're right or wrong. But when you're together and you're like, I think black's winning, and the other person says, I think black's winning, and you're like, we've tried these 3 things for white and none of them work. You're like, okay, that's it. You know?
And maybe another time I'd love to hear more about like the color thing you were talking about, because I think that's probably just a whole new thing for me.
Sure, color complexes, yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Color
Yeah,
complexes.
but we'll first, I think the second step, if you both enjoyed this, would be that we would go with an end game that you've got, and then maybe a third week if you want, and Anushka's interested too, we could try and do something that I think emphasizes color complexes. Okay, so that concludes this episode of Endgame Sensei. Thank you to our participants who did a great job of fighting out those positions and showed everybody how to do endgame sparring. Remember, everybody, that would be the start. We're keeping the episode reasonably lengthed, but in real life, you got to play more than twice. There was certainly still a lot of questions left in that position, so I could easily see that rich rook and knight versus rook and bishop going through 6-8 games before the players start to say, okay, we got it. And now, before we say goodnight to you tonight, we do have one other small segment we want to do, which is we want to talk about preparing for a tournament in 4 days.
Yeah.
So Anushka had asked me before you got here, Rachel, if I had any advice on preparing for the Chicago Open.
Please.
What day are you traveling? Is the first round Thursday or Friday or?
First round
Friday.
is it Friday?
I think it's
Thursday
Friday night.
evening. Okay, maybe you're
I
right.
thought
Yeah,
it
I
was-
think it might be.
I think it's Friday evening.
Okay, yeah.
I hope.
No, that
Yeah.
makes sense. That makes sense. I think I booked it for Thursday. Oh, Thursday the Open starts, but no one's playing the Open. Okay, so we're flying there Thursday afternoon. Yeah.
Cool. All right, it's great you're flying the day before. When I was your age, I always would go straight from the airport to my first game in order to save a night of hotel room costs.
Yeah.
And that definitely hurts your performance a lot, but you know, at a certain point in your life, you may or may not have any financial choices or options anyway, but it's cool that you're getting there days sooner. That also, by the way, incidentally, is what I did the day after finals, basically every year when I was in college, as I flew to Chicago. Maybe once I took the train, which took like 3.5 days. That was, oof. But yeah, I played the Chicago Open after college every year. Visited some college friends there, some high school friends there.
I didn't know it was such a historical like tournament.
Yeah, I mean, when I played it, it already said something like 25th annual, or I don't know, something. They'd been doing it for a bit.
Oh. Yeah.
But okay, when you've got a tournament in just a few days, there's very, very little you can do to prepare for it that's useful. Like on the last day, so Thursday for you, I would do maybe 30 to 60 minutes of calculation work, and that's it. And 30 to 60 minutes of exercise, maybe.
Okay.
And then during the tournament, you almost want to cut that down even more, like basically no chess work between games. And just for exercise, just something like brisk walking, nothing where you're really using up your energy and then arriving at the board needing to lie down. So yeah, because you're going to be playing multiple games a day, your energy is going to be an important resource. So Thursday would be a light day, and that leaves you Tuesday and Wednesday to prepare. You could potentially, options, you could review some of your openings. If you don't know what openings you're going to play, you could at least pick the openings even if you don't study them at all, because it's a little bit of a waste to sit down at the board and your clock's ticking and you're like, okay, am I an E4 player or a D4 player? So I play a lot of openings, so sometimes I would get to the board and be like, we'll see what I feel like. But that's kind of a waste of energy. It's better to have like a sense of, I'm here to play the French, or, I'm here to play the Gioco Pianissimo until we're all asleep. So you could at least pick your openings. That's reasonable.
Question. When you said like 30 to 60 minutes of calculation, what does that entail exactly? Like, what does that look like?
Like exercises that are at your level. So, ideally,
because I've done calculation work where it's like, you need to spend 30 minutes on the position, and then you look at the position, and then you take notes, and then after 30 minutes you see like the main lines that you've looked at, and then like what you would do based on your calculation analysis.
Awesome.
Or is it more like every positions where you like look for a couple minutes and it's like tactical, and it's like, okay, well, there's a bunch of things hanging, and it's like, okay, dude, take this line, or this line. Yeah.
So it's an option for you. The one thing you shouldn't be doing at your level anymore is like sort of like the puzzle rushy kind of things. Like, you're not looking to solve 20 back rank mates, or
fair enough.
Or like bishop h7, king h7, queen h5, knight g5 resigns. Like, it has to be a little more than that at this point to be useful. Normally the main work you'd be doing at your level would be problems that take you 5 to 10 minutes. That would normally be the main work you'd be doing. So they're a step beyond basic combinations, right? There's like, there's this defense that I can't crack, or you have to think creatively to see the defense, or there's an unusual move for you that you have to find within a couple patterns, So normally that's what you're kind of looking for.
Recommend finding those types of positions at our level.
You could just look at what the tactic book is in your cohort on Chess Dojo. Now it's a little bit late to order a book.
I
have the PDF. It's okay.
Yeah, maybe an ebook you could get in time, or if Anushka's got the book, she can show you which it is.
I have like a master folder of like all the chess PDFs that I got legally.
Nice.
Yeah.
Excellent. So like 5 to 10 minute exercises would be like a typical level for you. And then one way to arrange it also would be to take a set of like 6 to 8 positions and see if you can solve them in an hour. So you sort of allocate your time, not knowing in advance which ones are harder or easier, and you sort of try and get through them all and do like 1 hour of hard work, and then you're done. You can also do the 30-minute thing, which is a really great exercise. I've almost never had students who wanted to do that exercise. And it's really great that you're doing it. So that's amazing to hear that from you. You could do that too. You could do 1 or 2 of those.
No, I've just been given that as like a homework assignment of and it's really cool to do it too, like for positions that are meant for that, because you look at it and then you just see more and more as time goes on, and I feel like that's so cool. Positions like that, it's like 10 minutes in, you're like, wait, what about then? 20 minutes, you're like, whoa, there's actually so much to see. I don't know. Yeah.
And just
it reminds me of those. Yeah. No, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
Just like the question about where to get positions for like endgame sparring and stuff, you can also do that exercise just off of your own games. You just take your own game and you play through it till you get to a point that you remember was like super crazy.
Right.
And then you just sit down and do it all over again. And that's the therapy as well that I do for my middle game faux pas or my calculation mistakes, right? I go back to those positions and I say like, okay, you get 15, 20 minutes, just like in the game. Let's see if you can do any better than you did during the game. So that's often like, I'll do that as an exercise right before kicking off like my game analysis, right? If I'm suspicious that I botched a tactical moment in the game, the first thing I do is I set up that position, I do it as an exercise, and then I analyze it moving on the board and compare how I did in the game and how I did as an exercise and what I find analyzing.
Interesting. So you just freeze that position in time, take a bunch of notes about like different lines that you looked at, and then see like how different it was from what you were thinking in the game.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So so that's something you can do as well on Tuesday and Wednesday. You can do some calculation work. You could make sure you know what openings you want to play. I wouldn't recommend cramming like long lines that may or may not come up, and that just, for most people, just sort of feed into anxiety and never feeling fully done or prepared. So the last couple days to try and build new lines into an opening repertoire is meh. Most people do it because they feel a compulsion, but
We're prepared. Yeah.
I think it's pretty not a good use of time in the last 2 or 3 days, probably.
Where does the engine come into the whole like calculation analysis, like post-mortem, or like,
I give you permission
middle
to
game
touch an
therapy.
engine again once you're 2200.
But David still doesn't touch the engine, right?
I do occasionally. I try to force myself to start using it a little bit, but yeah,
Right.
very little.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to use it more, but everyone else that I know has to use it less. Pretty much.
So you only check like, once you've really thought that you've like solved the position.
Right.
It's
So
just
yeah,
an
even
afterthought
once
of, like,
you're
maybe
once
I
you're at a
missed
master level, any
Yeah.
position where you ask the engine before you ask yourself, you basically just wasted a training position or training opportunity, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then to me, the point of the engine is to assess my performance on that training position.
Right.
Right. I mean, to just have a bunch of positions in my game where I don't know if I did the right thing or not, and then turn on an engine and it tells me that I did the wrong thing, and then I don't know why, and I didn't put the effort in. That's just satisfying
like
our
a double
psychological desires. It's not learning any chess.
Yeah. It's a really good way of putting it.
And we all have those, right? We all want to be able to say like, oh my God, I was completely winning and I blundered this. But again, it's like what I said about the end games, right? I mean, how many people complain or whine, and how many people like just practice it and get better at it so they'll never lose that end game again?
No, it's the psychological thing. Like after the game, like, I immediately just plug it into Edge and I'm like, was I right here that this was the best move? Or like, was I right here that I didn't, this attack didn't work? Like, I want to know right away because I'm like, I want to, satisfy that. But it's like, maybe I should just channel that motivation into taking the time to sit down and using it as a calculation exercise. Yeah. And then like, that's how I actually learn from it instead of just like trying to get like immediate validation from the engine.
Yep. Like with anything in life, pretty much, not just in chess. Your mind wants to create a narrative.
Instant gratification.
Right?
Yeah.
It wants to craft a narrative that's going to support your sense of self, and that's going to allow you to not change your mind about anything, not change any of your thoughts, but just incorporate stuff into a narrative that's consistent with everything else you've been thinking up to that point. That's what you do with, when you read some news. That's what you do when a friend comes to you and tells you about something that happened to them. It's what you do with a chess game you played. You try to fit it into your narratives about yourself in a way that doesn't make you question yourself too much.
Cognitive biases. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, you just don't want to spend all your time in a state of uncertainty and stuff like that, right? But that's actually the state in which you learn and get better, is a state of uncertainty, but it's very psychologically unsettling.
Yeah. No, it's beautiful how much chess relates to life.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a whole like eternal podcast in itself of just like exploring that. I think what you just said was a really cool way. One of the really cool ways that chess relates to your life. Yeah. I know for me, like, I struggle with time management in my classical games, but I also struggle with time management in my life, and I think that one rule, like, Like
No
solving
way.
what? I think solving like, working on one like inherently like it fixes the other. Like they're both exactly the same thing, which is cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's my favorite thing that we learn as chess players, period, is we learn how to improve ourselves. And in chess, it's harder to hide from your mistakes and stuff. Normally it's more, it's really staring you in the face what you need to improve. And so I think chess players are well equipped to eventually improve themselves in any other way they want to in their lives.
Yeah.
Any other questions about the Chicago Open?
No.
No?
I can't think of any.
Ready to go. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. I guess one more question, I guess, just off the top of my head. If you feel yourself like, this opens a whole door of like how you think about chess in general, but like when you feel yourself like start to spiral, for example, like, you miss something that you feel like you shouldn't have missed, or, you were winning and then now, you're like, oh, I'm like not winning anymore, I don't see, and you're like starting to lose. Like, what do you tell yourself when you're like, you feel yourself start to spiral? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I if you're talking in a game, I mean, I just tell myself like I still have a position to play, and none of that is relevant. You know, I'll deal with all of that after the tournament.
By sitting channeling it through calculation exercise.
Yeah, I'll turn it into exercises for myself.
Cool. Yeah. Just feel yourself start to. You're like, okay, well, mark this down as a calculation exercise for later. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's my mindset or just how many tournaments I've played and how long I've like trained and optimized to it. But during a chess tournament, I almost don't care about anything that's not relevant to optimizing my result in the further moves and games.
Yeah.
So
very practical way of
it all is like dropping away as I'm there, and you could call me up and tell me something about an asteroid headed towards the Earth or whatever, and I would just discard it from my mind immediately because it's not relevant to winning my next game.
You're just next level.
Yeah. The only thing I care about is stuff that's going to help me, like.
So even if there's something going on in your life, you're able to just like completely just like be in the zone and just focus on what you're.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. And I mean, it's not like I was always perfect. I remember a time in high school where I was playing a tournament and then I blundered a winning position and then I was like, oh, shoot. And I spent my whole weekend here instead of doing my homework. It's like the final round of the tournament, and I'm like, oh my God, I didn't do my homework. And then like tomorrow morning I have to go to school and I'm going to be tired from this and I didn't do my homework and blah, 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 If there had still been a chance to save the game, that was all useless, right? And I shouldn't have been thinking about that. So definitely I understand that everyone can get into a negative thought and then sort of spiral into more and more negative thoughts. But yeah, now I generally try, I guess I've just over time dropped all that stuff more and more.
No, it's really cool that you're able to, or I think someone in the chat said advanced compartmentalization.
Yeah.
No, it's cool that you're able there's things going on in your life, but you're able to just be like, okay, this is all irrelevant right now. We're just going to focus on what's happening right now. And you're able to just like block everything else out. I feel like that's a really important skill.
I mean, another thing you can do is go to a tournament with your life in good order, so you're not distracted from the get-go, right? I mean, some people head to a tournament and like before the first move is played, they're wondering if they should be there. Did I make the right choice financially to be here, or should I be with my friend who needs me right now, or whatever it might be, right? So that all you're starting off in a tough spot where you're forced to do advanced compartmentalizing.
Just be ready, fully present there, and like fully wanting to do your best in the game.
Yeah. Sometimes if I'm struggling with not enjoying something in a tournament, like some of those bad thoughts, like a game went badly or a move went badly or something, you just think of like other places you could be, other things you could be doing that wouldn't be as good as being in a chess tournament, and then that sometimes can help you re-find the point and the pleasure of being where you are. It's like there's a lot of worse options
than dark alley. A
lot of worse options than being at a chess tournament with a bunch of people you probably like. you know,
Fair enough.
yeah.
Being grateful for just having the opportunity to play in the tournament. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good way to look at it. Awesome.
Yeah. So here's the story from somebody in my chat. He says, I once had a roommate for a tournament whose first words to me were, I don't want to be here. He withdrew with 3 rounds to spare.
Oh, man.
Right? So sometimes you can see it coming when you show up at a tournament that you may or may not
Yeah.
be in the right spot at the right
I've
time.
seen people withdraw just because they're like so scared of losing rating.
Mhm.
So like they win 2 games and they lose 1, and they're like, and they withdraw, and I'm like, why did you just spend like $200 on the entry fee? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be fun, if nothing else.
Yeah.
So that's good. Like at least we'll have each other and our friends.
Yeah. It's the first
Yeah.
time I'm going like in a group of friends. We're all staying together, and we can like
Yeah.
analyze after. We can
Awesome.
play some blitz after.
Yeah.
I mean, probably not between
Yeah.
rounds ideally, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Up to you. You have to
The
balance
only
like fun
reason-
with everything else, right?
Yeah, we can stay like the night before and the night after because we instead of like getting hotel rooms which were very expensive, we just like all like 6 of us booked an Airbnb together.
Yeah.
And it was much cheaper.
Yeah, that's definitely brought prices down compared to in the past.
Yeah.
I guess I mean I don't know how much time you have. I do have another question. If that's
I might dip out
Sure.
at some point because my roommate
Yeah.
needs to sleep. So if I just leave, like, thank you, David, for a wonderful
Yeah.
lesson. And thank you, Rachel.
You're
And I'll
welcome.
stay for as long as I can.
Well, someone like about like time management in the time control. I think it's 90, and then after 40 moves is another 30 minutes.
Mhm.
I know some people, because like I prone to like being much more down on time than my opponent, unless my opponent's also really slow, but I'm like tend to be pretty slow. And I think one way of looking at it is like make it a top priority to not be more than, let's say, 10 minutes down on the clock. Or like another way of looking at it could be like I want at least 45 minutes by move 20. I don't know what your guidelines are
Right.
for time management in general in that sense.
I mean, a long-term solution is you're going to have to learn to make some of your decisions on instinct instead of by calculation.
Yeah.
I haven't seen a ton of your games, so I'm going off of just something Anushka told me 2 hours ago, which may or may not be true.
Okay.
But she thinks
I'm
that
curious
you make
what that is, but okay.
she thinks you make a
Yeah.
lot of your decisions by just looking at moves. Like this move, that move, this move, that move kind of thing.
Yeah. This is true.
So there may be positions where it's like, you just have to move your bad piece towards a better square, and you're thinking at great length about it. There was a point where this game was going against you, the second game, and you were low on time, and we thought you should play c3 to trade some pawns. Like right when she took the open file from you, the knight is not defended enough for one moment for you where you could maybe play c3 and trade some stuff. So according to Anushka, you're not a very intuitive player, so ultimately you will need some intuition to fight the time trouble. I've made rules for myself about how much time I'm allowed to think on a non-tactical move or a non-critical move, right? So basically, whether or not I try to solve everything by calculating moves, I still know which moves are moves that other people would calculate on and which moves are moves that I'm calculating on, but other people would just like play a normal move.
Yeah.
And
That's definitely
yeah, so I made rules for myself. I said 10 minutes is the max amount of time. This is pretty new. And all this stuff changes with time controls. When I was playing in tournaments before, it was 40 moves in 2 hours or 30 moves in 90 minutes and then a second time control. So now I'm playing some more 90 plus 30 this past year. And so I had to adjust a little bit. I made this new rule of thumb that I can't spend more than 10 minutes on a move that's not critical. That's not deciding whether I win or lose the game, basically.
that's a good I'm gonna adopt that from you right
Yeah,
now.
you could. I mean, that's that's just one thing for me, and that's
Yeah.
based partly on the fact that I've slowed down how fast I calculate, so I need a little more time left to calculate the critical moment. I used to be a very fast calculator, so if you gave me a position with a forced win, then there'd be a very good chance that I would solve it in like 3 minutes. And now sometimes even after 15 minutes, I'm like, it's probably this, but I'm slightly guessing.
Yeah.
You know? And so I decided, well, if I ever want to like truly win this game, I need 15 to 20 minutes minimum on my clock when I get to a winning position. And once I find the winning move, I can mop up on the increment, right? Like, you know, like, and that's why everyone has to calibrate for themselves, right? Like, do you feel like you're 100% to win a game once you're up a piece? Maybe, maybe not, right? I do. So I know once I find that forced win, I don't need any time. But to find the forced win, I now know that I need 15 to 20 minutes, not 7 or 8 minutes. 7 or 8 minutes, and the weight of knowing I have a winning position and that I might miscalculate it, like, it's just not working for me anymore at my current level or age or practice level compared to how much I used to practice. So I had to make that, so then I have to set myself up to have that time. And I'm just like, yeah, you're just deciding on like which square to put a knight on. Either square is okay. There might be like a fourth of a pawn difference, but like you can't spend, this is me talking to myself, you can't spend 20 minutes on something that's worth a fourth of a pawn. That's what you get to spend on a decision that's worth 3 pawns.
Right.
So.
No, that's a really good way of thinking about it. Like, is this really that big of a difference? Like, you losing 5 minutes is like kind of like material in itself.
Yeah, it
No,
is.
I
It's
haven't
one
thought
of your
about,
resources.
I thought of it like, I haven't thought of it like 10 minutes could be like worth material.
Yeah.
That could incentivize.
Right.
I feel like.
And that's like a hard and slightly weird and tricky thing to do, because if you think about it, you're like, well, no, I could play with 1 minute against 10 with an extra piece and I would still win, right? Because you're like, then I'm already up the piece, right? So you're like, so a piece is not worth 10 minutes or whatever. But given that your opponent has a nearly equal position and nearly equal time on the clock, like giving up 9 or 10 minutes means you're not going to find the right move later on. So it will have this big impact. Maybe here's a useful thought. You've surely heard people talk about critical moments, but what is a critical moment? A critical moment, you can define it basically mathematically. A critical moment is a moment when the difference between the best move and a plausible second or third best move is really huge.
Yeah.
So if the third best move is a half a pawn less good than the first best move, it's not a critical moment. It might be like an interesting decision, but you know. And I say the second or third move because sometimes you're in a position where there's like 2 winning moves and 2 losing moves and 1 drawing move or whatever, right? So it's not always just between the first move and the second move. But, but between plausible candidate moves is the difference in evaluation more than like 2 points, you're in a critical moment.
Yeah, I guess I've never really looked at it as like I'm giving away like material or position almost when I give away time, which it kind of is, and I think that just switched something in my brain. So thank you.
Yeah, it's dependent on the
Like,
position
oh,
again.
It's like, well, maybe if I spend more time, then like by the time I'm low on time, I'm in a better position and I could just win. I'm just like already winning, so it's fine. Which is just not the right way to look at it at all. So
it's related to how difficult is that position that you have specifically to you. That determines how much time you need to have left, right? That's why if I see a line that might win a piece on move 10, I could spend up to 80 minutes double checking if I needed to, or triple checking, right? Because I know once I win that piece, it doesn't matter. Like, it's over, right? So you always have to think in terms of how hard is the position, how much time am I going to need later on, right? If I've got 1 minute instead of 10, what decisions am I going to mess up? How important are they going to be? That kind of thing.
Right. No, that's a really good way of looking at it. I've asked about it, but this is the first time it feels like there's actually something that's changed in my brain. So,
all right.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. So,
Yeah.
good luck in Chicago, and just send me a message if you want to do a second episode when you're back.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
All right. And have a lot of fun with all your friends, chess friends. Woo!
Yay.
Yay.
Should
Maybe
we all
make a
raid?
vlog. Yeah.
Yeah, who should I raid?
Or,
don't
yeah,
know.
should we all raid the same person? That could be fun.
Yeah.
Um,
Let me look up chess.
yeah. Not too many people are on right now. Why So Serious and Bingo Wings Gal is on. That's
Let me see
all
if
I
there's
see so
anyone
far.
else I know.
To all my friends on YouTube and Twitch, we're preparing to end the stream. As you can hear, I wish you all a great day or great night, depending where you are in the world, and look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Hey. Hi, Joel. Good morning. Okay. Yeah, it's up to you, Anushka.
It's up to me.
Yeah.
Hey, someone's saying that they're streaming before the Chicago Open. Omi D. Malik, but I've never seen this person before.
Oh, I know him.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think he's a national master who raps.
Very cool.
Sick.
Yes, because I rated him once because I didn't know other chess players who like to rap.
Okay.
What's their name? Sorry.
I think Omid Malik.
Yeah.
I think I said it wrong. OMID MALEK. You rated that guy.
Oh, I see
Robbie's
it. Yeah.
rated
Cool.
that. Okay.
Cheers, Carl.
This will be a fun raid.
Cool.
Okay.
MIDMAL.
Cool. Everyone ready?
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.